Why We Bleep is sponsored by Signal Sounds. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't resist a bargain. And so I found a man on Facebook Marketplace who said he'll sell me some incredibly weird and unusually esoteric instruments on the cheap. Unfortunately, he lives rather far away, and so I've driven 5 hours to druidic Salisbury, and I'm standing in a rather remote field. Odd choice to meet here, really, but it's definitely the one he said he'd be at, and it is now rather wet, and it is rather dark, and he is rather late. It's 4 hours late now. I must admit I'm slightly starting to think I should have just gone on signalsounds.com to get my weird noise fix, as I saw they've got a whole crazy big restock of error instruments. Everyone's going mad for the new This Is Not Rocket Science Calabria rack modules they've done. There's a limited run of the new Moffin Z versus Boy Harsher drone modules, as well as they've restocked the LZX and Syntony video synthesis modules, plus rather fetching Signal Sounds t-shirts and other merch. I really wouldn't mind some dry clothes right now. I'm very cold. Oh. Someone's coming. And they seem to have friends. And they're chanting. Oh dear. I'm finally being murdered. So, to explore interesting new gear without the risk of being murdered by druids, visit signalsounds.com. That's signalsounds.com. Why We Bleep is also sponsored by thonk.co.uk. This tune is wicked, isn't it, mate? Are you right? How's your night going? Was that... What? Oh, you're dead into gnarly FM and acid bass? You want to build your own modules to both enjoy the satisfaction of making something yourself, and you want to save money, mate? Oh, mate, check out thonk.co.uk. They've got kits for the Timo Rosendahl FMP. That's the chip that was in the Sega Master System, turned into an FM knobby module. Wicked. They've also got the ADAC 107 acid source, complete acid voice in 9HP. Yeah, no, it's literally 9HP. Figure that one out later, mate. And then they've got the Castor and Pollux too. Yeah, that's the oscillators from a Juno 106 turned into a beautiful cosmic panel that looks like the sky on a moonless prairie night, mate. The bollocks. It's the bollocks. Speaking of acid sources, is your face currently melting, or is that just me? Gonna go have a dance. Catch you later, mate. So, for face-melting modules, visit thonk.co.uk. Why? Hi, I'm speaking to you from a hotel room in Salisbury, southwest England. Not somewhere I planned to record the intro to this podcast, but I live a sort of slightly weirder freewheeling life where I have to just go and do things like record a podcast with Alex and John from the band Everything Everything, which I did today, and then also... because I'm like stocking up my studio, I don't love Mark Zuckerberg's advert factory, but I would say the one good of Facebook is that the marketplace is like the last bastion of kind of weird, off-kilter, like Wild West deals for stuff. I don't know if you've spent any time on it, but I mean, can't recommend spending an enormous amount of time. There's a lot of weird, questionable ads, whether like people selling mirrors, and mostly I think it's about what you see reflected in the mirror, and that's what you would get if you bought the mirror. But for me, you know, eBay, Reverb, these stores are fairly well plundered at this point. And everyone kind of knows the value of stuff, but Facebook, man, Facebook's like that, still that weird Wild West, and you can find audio gear for good old deals, you know, like kind of 5 years ago prices for stuff. And like one great example was I really wanted a Yamaha TG33. I don't know if you know it. It's like a ambient wavetable Rompler master device. It's just like very weird device, as used by LFO, by the way. There's some LFO sounds on there. Anyway, I'm not paying 300 quid because all the cool kids know that the TG33 is like this cool ambient wonder synth. I'm going to hold out. I'm going to hold out for a Wild West deal. And I, sure enough, found one for £150 in some like west of London, like when my wife was visiting the area to see my brother-in-law and sister-in-law. And I got her to go and pick it up. And so I kind of love it, I must say. And long story short is I'm here because I was interviewing everything and was like, I found a Midas Venice, which is a desk I've been looking for some time, for an insane price in Salisbury, home of the beautiful cathedral and other interesting wonders. And potentially the ghost that will sit on the edge of my bed and look at me staying in my cheap little hotel. Yeah, so basically I added on a 6-hour round trip and a hotel stay in order to pick this Midas Venice 320 up. Such is my commitment to a Dawless jamming that I would travel completely across the country. I think it's in good condition. It was owned by a church, therefore it's right. It's only been used every Sunday. And it's been blessed, of course. So that will negate any devilry that has occurred within the circuits. So that's kind of what I'm up to. Yes, we've got podcasts coming. I actually have another podcast recorded as well. If you like this podcast, please consider sponsoring on Patreon, where at Christmas time, I did a special bonus thing where I read M.R. James's Whistle and I'll Come to You, the whole short story. It's an hour-long audiobook reading by yours truly. Lots of vocal fry is used during the transmission. And you can get that if you subscribe on Patreon. So if you enjoy Why We Bleep, please consider hopping on. There are bonuses. Patreon.com/Mylar Melodies. Yes. It's Tom Whitwell time. It's Whitwellian time. For it has been more than a year since we had a Whitwellian ramble. And that's because yours truly had to give up his day job. I just was in no position last year to get the podcast done. Trying to balance having a full-time job and doing a podcast and having a YouTube channel and having a family. Problematic, as I'm sure you can imagine. And so we had a fallow year like Glastonbury's Fields. And to make up for it, we have a bumper, big ass, nearly 3-hour conversation with Tom, which is as Tom Whitwellian as you would hope. It is a freewheeling conversation about where he has been, what he has done, what he's interested in, what he's been looking at, and just stuff shooting the hay. I will spoil a few things, just to wet your whistle. Tom has been taking a sabbatical, which is to say that he's not been at work, but it turns out that Tom has been working incredibly hard in other ways and means and is developing something. There is a big, little music thing coming you may or may not be aware of. And if you look on Tom's Instagram, Tom has shared some sort of sneaky pics of it. Look at those really carefully, study them. And if you study this podcast through it, and this isn't intentional, by the way, I was just reflected that this happened during the podcast. I was like, Tom, you've kind of sowed clues about what it is throughout this podcast. So, yes, I'm hyping him because I've seen what it is and it's really cool. It's genuinely cool. When you see it, you will be like, oh, wow, what? It's what? How many, it does what? What's that? What's that bit? What's that bit? You will say. You'll say those things. Come back. Mark my words, my friend. I'm really happy that we've been able to talk to Tom. I took a trip down to London, especially, once again, another weird freewheeling thing I can do is I'm going to go to London and record this. And so I spoke to Tom, and I also have a conversation recorded with RYK, Jake of RYK Modular, who is the person responsible for the M185 concept that gave birth to the Metropolis. So a very important person whose story has not been told. I do not know of an interview with Jake. But I have recorded one. So that is in an upcoming episode, as is a talk with everything, and as is this talk with Tom. Thank you for listening to Bleeps for 6 years. This is the Mark 6 edition of my conversations with Tom. Oh, having missed one. I think it's 6. And so you've been very patient. Come, you and me, and we'll go to the shed in Herne Hill. Thanks.
Okay, are we good to go?
Yeah, come on.
Right, before we do anything else, we're going to do an exercise. So I'm going to give you some paper.
Yeah.
So I have some paper myself. And what we're going to do is some drawing.
I like to draw.
So we're going to do you want the Foundation Louis Vuitton pencil? You have that one?
Yes. Surprised you need to ask that question.
And we're going to do that blind drawing.
Yeah.
So you've done this before?
I have, yeah.
Okay. So the rule, obviously the critical rule is that I will look at you and you will look at me.
Yeah.
And you'll absolutely not look down at what you're drawing.
Yeah, I swear, I promise.
And you can do it, you're supposed to do it with a single line. You can if you want, or you can lift it up and bring it down. I don't think it makes much difference either way. But the real trick, and so what we'll do it, not looking down, then we'll turn them face down, and then we can come back to them later on, I think.
Okay.
And that'll be an interesting thing to do.
What are we going to draw, Tom?
You're drawing me, I'm drawing you.
Okay.
And should we do a minute?
Yeah.
Let's do an actual timer and everything.
I might edit this in the actual...
Yeah, you don't need to sit staring at us drawing. I mean, that'd be exciting.
Staring lovingly into each other's eyes.
Exactly. Okay. Right.
Okay.
Go.
Wait, has the minute begun?
It had, but you can start again if you want.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I'm turning it. Yeah.
Are you ready?
I think so.
Okay, let's go. It's quite long a minute, isn't it? Okay, face down. There we go.
That was fun.
We can return to that later.
What does it mean, though? Or what will it mean?
Well, I read like a blog post or something about it. I'd never heard of it before. And they were talking about just getting random people in the street, sit them down and get them to do exactly that exercise. And what I found when I tried it was I was just amazed by what I'd drawn. Because you draw stuff and it is all like nothing is where it should be, nothing connects properly. But I found that the kind of lines and the shapes and the kind of gestures,
yeah,
I was like, this is great. I really liked it. I liked the kind of feeling of it. And like when I did 2 or 3 with different things, there was a very different kind of vibe between them, depending on what I was looking at. And if I was trying to draw something myself, I couldn't do it at all. I've tried doing...
That was a minute.
I've tried doing like... What if I do this, but just occasionally look down and check it joins up? Completely kills it, and it becomes me trying to draw something that absolutely doesn't work. So I found it a really interesting kind of lesson about kind of doing it naturally rather than thinking about it, turning off the judgment, I think, is what I found interesting.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, because you can't see it, so how can you judge the drawing?
So you can't judge it, so you just have to... And it obviously, I've been thinking about that. I did that thing a few years ago with the making an album in an evening, where I kind of got it to print out these instructions for tracks and just did them, like 3 minutes of rehearsal, 3 minutes of recording. And that was the same feeling there. I was like, I have no idea. I'm not sitting making something and then going, is that good, is it bad? I'm just making something and pressing start, pressing stop, and then the thing's finished. And so that thing I'm doing in Falmouth, the workshops, is that notion. It's that idea of put a bunch of people in a house in the countryside, and give them that kind of discipline of just saying, we're not judging, we're not improving, we're not trying to make something better. We are just trying to stick to a kind of brief. It's like, you need to make something that reflects this line. And so you decide how you reflect that line. But at the end, all you can say is, yes, I reflected that line, or no, I wasn't really concentrating on it, and I actually came in with an idea for a sample I wanted to use, so I just did that. But if they come in and go, this line does this from a graphic score, I am somehow going to interpret that line for 4 minutes. We'll start and I'll finish. Then I'll have a thing I've made. That, to me, seems quite attractive and quite interesting. So I found that drawing thing like a really mad instant version of that. Of being able to produce something that for me was better than what I could normally do.
And you're doing this because basically, well, it makes me think of a lot of things. There's a John Cage quote, isn't there, where it's like, is it John Cage where there's the instructions for artists, and one of them is to separate the writing and the judging process.
Yeah.
And I then also think of social media and how we rush to be like validate me, you know, to go straight to the sort of warm fuzzy feeling of you know, give me a little like because I made something, rather than let me reflect on. But also, it sounds like you're saying it's like a granularization, that you're making it more, you're having a more granular sort of. I mean, is it just drawing, or when you're doing a workshop, are you saying this is music that people will be making?
Yeah, so it's music that people are making, and I think I found when I did that exercise of recording 6 tracks, one after the other, you know, with an instruction for each, and in that case, it was with that lunchbox modular there, I was like, what can I possibly do with this, with my understanding of this very limited set of things, that somehow responds? And the score in that case was like a few words, like mood type words. So it would be like furious, happy, something like that. And then I think it had a couple of sort of prompts about types of aggressive sound or smooth sound or those sorts of things. And you were just like, okay, with that, what can I possibly do that somehow feels like it connects with that, feels like it is in some way reflecting that in a very, very small amount of time. And I found it so kind of intense, that experience of just it's very much like that is the kind of improvisation experience as well. If you're like, I've got to do something now. I can't listen to it for 5 minutes and think of something. I can't rewind it. I've got to do something so it kind of has a beginning and a middle and an end. In a very broad sense, and then I've got to get to that. And for me, because I don't do much music, and for you as somebody who performs and plays music, it's quite a different. You're pretty much more used to that. But I found that putting yourself in this what felt like quite an extreme situation, just in your own head, and kind of trying to respond very quickly, and then stopping and recording. Just the way when you're drawing that, it feels quite like how do I.
Specifically to drawing, the other thing is that you bring, if you can, basically that people develop. I think I've tried this book. Well, try this process from the book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain.
Oh, okay.
Which is really good. I just bought for my niece yesterday, because she's drawing loads. And one of the things I'm sure it has that exercise in it, and it's part of it is the fact that, you know, we have symbology in our brains. We learn to draw an ear. We learn to draw an eye.
Yeah.
And what this is forcing you to do is actually, on a granular level,
draw what you see.
Draw the true contour, or at least an attempt at the true contour of what it really was.
Yeah.
But yeah, the separation of judgment and I guess that's the problem with making music on a computer, is you can just endlessly get the opportunity to rethink and rejudge. And what you're saying is by, you know, and it is the reason I got into live modular performance, was just an absolute being so sick of not producing music on a DAW, that I was like, I am just literally going to force myself to do it in real time on this stupidly expensive box.
Yeah.
And that is the sort of primary motivator. Was then I'll have a track or I'll have music, and I'll judge whether it's good later. It's
the recording as well. I think the experience you get if you're on Ableton or something is you're recording, a bar. You're recording like 3 notes or something, and then you're listening to it over and over again, and you're polishing it. That business of saying I'm now going to record, 4 minutes, and then it's stopped, I think is really interesting. It's quite a different
like a whole take.
So you're like, but you're not, and you're also not like, I'm not going to do a jam for 2 hours and then pick out the good bits.
Mm-hmm.
You can say I'm going to start and I'm going to do something and then I'm going to come to an end and I'm going to press stop. That I think is a really interesting.
This is what Daniel Miller and Gareth Jones did with their Sunroof.
With Sunroof. Oh yeah,
It's
I should talk to him about that.
Yeah, it's literally like they said we have a 6-minute timer.
Yeah.
I think they pre-worked out like, this sounds good. We could do a bit of this, do a bit of that. Right, timer starts. 6 minutes later, then you've
got 2 tracks and you finished.
Yeah,
and that's the
output. Do that 6 times or whatever. You've got.
Well, that's the thing is the scale as well. It's being able to say, if you're doing it like this, you don't produce 1 track in 3 days. You can produce 20 of them if you wanted. The other thing I've been thinking about is if you're doing a modular, whether you can actually build in. So, like if you've got like a maths or something, an envelope generator, I think maths probably is about 3 minutes will be its longest envelope.
Without additional CV modification. Well, if
that sort of thing.
If you send it negative CV, you can make the cycles longer.
Okay. But either way, you've got an envelope that goes from 0 to full in the length of a song.
Yeah.
That's quite an interesting thing to set up and work on in itself. You set that off, connect it to 2 oscillators. For a start, you'll just have the 2 of them phasing against each other in quite an interesting way. But then you say, well, how do I respond to what they're doing? Mm. And you've been forced within, obviously you're not forced because it'll then start again and give you another full 3 minutes. But that idea of how do you build those limitations into the system you're working with, I think is quite interesting.
You have a modular that like, you get one of those Amazon plugs that like will turn it on for a certain amount of time and it'll just switch a modular off at a certain time.
Actually, that is like that move thing I designed.
What's that? Oh yeah, well if you move, it makes a sound.
Well, it can do either way. It's you can either say if you stand still, the modular goes off, or if you move, the modular goes off. And it's quite interesting the idea when that's
actually really useful for like could be used at modular synth events where people are doing dance music. Like if you point at the audience, and if everyone just stands and holds their beers,
then it will stop.
Then the music
master channel
must dance.
It's got 2 channels. The stereo will just cut off. And you'd be there.
Actually, a really good idea.
But I did also like it where it stops if you approach the modular. So you go out there and you kind of change some things, and then you'd step back. And you have to, and it's got like about a 2-second wait. So you step back and then you stand perfectly still, and then it springs back to life. It's obviously also it's quite fun also with if you're not just taking the master out, you're doing like a couple of channels of modulation. So it's like flat, and then when you stand still, it starts moving. That's quite fun.
Oh, I like that.
I believe they still have some in stock at Thonk because it hasn't been the biggest selling module.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, since
surprisingly,
you mentioned the whole application of making people dance. I like the idea that your modular would sort of encourage you to have better behaviours.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have a module that is just like has a little screen and just gives you advice. It just pops up. Well, like oblique strategies, which is fair enough, but.
You could definitely do an oblique strategies module. I have thought about that. It'd be quite big, quite annoying.
Yeah. Or it could
just be paper. So every time you put a clock into it, it gives you a new oblique strategy. And they just sit there permanently.
Or it could be like the disting with like one character at a time. Just
that scrolls across.
Just really, really fast.
Yeah, that would be quite good.
We last met in January of 2022, and we may have met in December of 2021 potentially.
Yes,
we spoke. That was when we last virtually met.
Yes,
so it's been years. It's been multiple.
Yeah, you
years
haven't been to the revamped shed. It's changed around. Green walls. We don't have the
proper banging in here.
We don't have the. We used to have a palm trees mural
on
the wall there, which was quite nice. But
I did like that.
We've now got an actual palm tree.
Yes, there's there's like a little banana tree
On wheels.
which I like that it is portable. It's very heavy.
I better take a picture. That's good.
And no, it's a nice space. And actually, I finally also have a studio now. So I joined your club.
Have you finished it? You were simply building it.
Well,
insulation.
I should clarify.
soundproofing.
I haven't finished it.
Right.
Because there are still like cladding aspects to complete. There is still skirting board to put inside, a bit of paint.
Don't need skirting board in a shed.
And then do a shit in the corner and then shut the door and leave. You've just got like a little nodular skirting board, but
That's just to connect the floor to the wall.
otherwise it would fall down.
And otherwise your resistors are going to fall down the crack.
I have built it. It is really good. It was.
Did you build the actual structure?
I know. I had people that came and did that. Like and so we did the SIPs thing. So
What's a SIPs thing?
SIPs is structural insulated panels, which are like like ice cream wafers from back in when we were kids, and and it was 2 bits of wafer and in the middle a big wad of ice cream. Well,
So that's the wall.
Imagine that as a wall. So imagine
Wow.
2 sheets of OSB, the stuff that Moog build their stands out of at trade shows.
That's a very niche reference to explain ISP to people.
Thank you, you're welcome. And then in the middle is like polystyrene.
Yeah.
But it's like really good polystyrene.
Is it soundproofing as well, just heat?
It does have a good soundproofing element on one level, which is that it is an airtight structure, and without doing a small building courses, they can come and in 2 days they built the structure. So in 2 days it went from a concrete pad to there is a
How many was they?
2 people.
So I built this with my dad
Yeah,
in 7 days.
I mean, that is outrageous. But your dad has built things before.
He has built things before.
Yeah, which is and
that was like 10, 12 years ago, and it's still standing and it hasn't leaked.
Yeah, I know. And you basically got it for the material cost, and you did it when like plywood wasn't made. Russian plywood wasn't an issue.
Russian plywood still exists.
And just everything is so expensive now. Like everything has gone up ridiculously, which is also why like the price of when things get released and people are like, it's a bit expensive, but it's like everything's more expensive and it cost anyway. But they came and put it up, and the problem is that it is very light, whereas brick is dense. The density of brick helps stop sound pass through.
Yeah.
However, the airtightness of the SIP system also has its advantages. There's no way for air to get in and out of a well-sealed...
Do you get that nice effect when you open and close the door and your ears go funny? It's like a slight sucking effect.
No, because I've had to ventilate it. Have you ventilated this room?
No, but this is not at all airtight. This is... This is
a Whitwell special.
Plasterboard on the inside, which we'd actually get someone else to do.
Yeah.
Then a layer of like rock wool, which was, I think I did buy one that was more soundy than heaty. But I don't know, no idea. And then on the other side of that, you've got just a membrane.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of that, you've got oak cladding, and on the back, possibly one of the sides, you've just got plywood. So there's not that much to it, but it's got a bit of... But you do get that, like, if a window's opening the door feels different. It's like there's definitely some kind
sealed,
of... It's just
point.
about sealed.
The question is, I mean, you keep it warm. It's quite warm in here, despite my natty jumper. I'm slightly warm.
Yeah.
And I bring it up only because if you're listening to this and you are going to build a garden room, sealing your garden room that is full of music equipment is generally considered a bad thing.
Oh, for condensation.
Because, yes.
Yeah, I don't get condensation noticeably in here. And
do you get any mould? Have you got mouldy bits?
No mould at all. No damp, no humidity issues. It's been... Because I think it can probably breathe plenty.
Well, I think because of...
It's just plaster.
Because you've done it yourself, because it's a little... Maybe it has the right level of wonkiness.
It's got quite... I mean, you can see the whole thing on a slope as well.
You did tell me once that a marble would like roll
This was the ridiculous
floor.
thing that when we installed the pad on the... It's not on concrete, it's on slabs.
Yeah.
We didn't think to say to the guy installing the slabs that we'd like it to be flat.
You just said you wanted slabs.
Just wanted slabs. And then we didn't really think about it much. And when we were doing it, we had a kind of like tent, pergola kind of thing there to cover up all the material.
Yeah.
So you couldn't get any distance away from it. So we built it.
You didn't notice.
We took the tent down and we were like, that doesn't look terribly straight. And literally, if you're sitting on we've got kind of rugs down on it now, but if it's the bare floor and you're sitting on a chair with rolly wheels, you kind of have to keep yourself up a little bit.
Do you have chocks under the system?
You should do, yeah, that would work.
Chocks away when Tom's day's finished. Yeah. I don't know if mine is definitely not completely straight, but then I've come to learn from renovating our house is that very rarely in any structure are any walls completely parallel, perpendicular, or everything is a bit wonky and crap.
So have you got neighbours that if you're playing music will be annoyed by you playing loud music?
I hope not, because I spent a mini moog in soundproofing it.
Okay, so you properly soundproofed it.
Yeah, I actually have.
So beyond the building itself, the fabric of the building.
So inside, I did the whole thing of having what's called genie clips. So genie clips are so it
doesn't transfer the vibrations.
Correct.
Through.
They're like rubber grommeted clips that ran all the way the inside of the building.
Wow.
Rails that go on the rubber grommeted clips. Rock wall that goes in between the rubber grommeted rails, and then double plasterboard that goes 2 layers of plasterboard, the entire thing.
And how big is it? Is it bigger than this space?
I'm afraid so. Yeah, it's like 4.5 meters, 4x5. I think so. It is quite big.
Oh, okay. So it's about twice as big as this then.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not it's a bit longer, and it's like 3 times.
I think this is about 4 meters. Yeah. Okay.
So
you can really you can have a drum kit in there, and the neighbours aren't notice.
I don't know if that's the thing. I've tested it with 90 dB, with just a crap level meter, 90 dB, playing Boards of Canada, and then shut the door. And if you stand outside the door, it's quiet.
Yeah.
And if you go 30 feet, you can't hear a dang thing.
Yeah. I mean, I've never ever had any issue or complaint with here, but I'm not sitting here playing loud music all day long.
Loud. You have got double glazing. Well, you've got a single one. No, it's
double glazing on all of those.
It's it's surprising. I mean, I took the view that with the SIPs, the compromise is twofold. The compromise is that SIPs has very low mass, so bass can just leave and go on its merry way. But I haven't tested it extensively, but I am set further back from my neighbours, so it's not that big an issue.
Yeah.
But the
main thing.
The main issue is ventilation, because having watched some YouTube videos, there's people who are like, I've been in here a year and there's mold. And mouldy gear, mouldy equipment, bad. And so
might as well start smoking if you're going to do that.
Exactly. I thought I won't install that and I'll just start smoking. So I've installed this mechanical heat MHRV thing, which is what it does is it extracts the air and the moisture, and it returns the warm air back into the room, and it chucks the moisture outside.
So welcome to the Passive House building
passive
podcast.
Building channel.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to do TikToks I really know what I'm talking about. I haven't just read about it once and then just made a TikTok authoritatively. But it is, I would say, the best thing. I mean, I've got a list of things gear that I've bought, but the studio...
Are you going to buy really fancy monitors and get it all fully sound acoustic treated?
No, I did want to get some big vintage 3-ways, Kef 104s or something these big.
But you didn't. You bought little ones.
Audio Gold-tastic ones.
About what, $1,500?
Not for Kefs. They're not that special, but you could get them.
But Tannoys.
Yeah, getting a Tannoy. What are they called? Gold.
Yeah, get a couple of them. Yeah.
And have make it Spirit Land.
And get tube amplifiers. Sell all this gear just sitting there listening to records.
That's tempting, but my hearing's really bad at the moment. It's kind of worthless. I mean, my hearing's no worse than any sort of 60-year-old audiophile. So maybe
that's perfect.
That's the point. But the studio. I think the best way of putting it is that the studio cost 5 mini Moogs.
Yes,
that's my current investment on the studio, which is,
or that's about 1.5 synthes.
Is it?
Maybe a couple of VCS3s.
Well, it's about 1 Jupiter 8 on Reverb.
Yeah,
Maybe not on reverb. It's not that bad.
I mean, if you're underspending your CS80, it's obviously going to be a terrible place.
It's cheaper than a CS80. I mean, thank goodness. But it is. I would say that having.
So what is it that's the difference? What is it that's made it, that makes it such a this is the best thing?
Because it's my space and I can put things wherever I want. Whereas, to contrast, it was previously, I was in the corner of our family living room.
Yeah.
At one point, our living room where it was shared, where we were making food in it because we were sorting the kitchen out. So there's in my Metropolix video, there's one bit where you can hear shh.
And that's cooking.
In the background, that's Rach frying something behind me as I'm demonstrating a module. So, and to contrast that with just having your own space where everything can be set up. If there was one moral or super dumb, super obvious, but just having the space to have your thing set up so that you don't have to set it up before you play with it is the most transformative and gratifying and important thing you could probably ever do.
I remember when I first started talking to people who had modulars and wanted to talk about them. I talked to somebody who had one of those, two of those for 9, whatever they're called, cases.
LC9s.
And he said exactly that. He said the transformational thing is you come down, he was he's a writer, you want to spend 10 minutes, little gap, and you go over and you turn it on and you're in an immediate bleep bloop world.
Yeah.
I had that for a bit and I'm now completely destroyed it because all of my stuff is ridiculous, cobbled together DIY nonsense. I have modular there that's got a big chunk in the middle for just trying out new modules that don't have face plates.
I mean, it's got
none of it works. It's all cobbled together and it's really annoying.
Your modular, I have a modular like this where it's just the graveyard of stuff.
I never use it.
Yeah. What do you use? Do you use this music easel?
I use that music easel quite a lot. I haven't used it as much recently, but that I did use a lot and feel like I kind of learnt it.
That's something where you can just rock up to.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's exactly that. You just ping it on and then you're doing stuff. And you plug in my enormous collection of ridiculous...
Contravulations for it.
Yeah, exactly. Program cards. I mean, this is the most ridiculous one. That is a good thing. It's a modular, put a modular inside your modular.
So this is like a patch card, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is really cool. You've soldered these things on, have you? Or
so you solder those on, which you can do, and then you can all of the things you can't do on the front panel, or all of the things that you want to kind of preset, you can put into there. So things like on my one, which is an old one, not an old one, but it's a DIY one. It's not one of the newest ones from Buckler. You can't do voltage control over envelopes, but with this you can. And then you can patch anything to anything else, basically.
I love the idea that you've made it so, because the alternative is the joke is what was wrong with soldering resistors onto a PCB as a one-way process in order to
which is true. I think that's absolutely fine.
Perfectly accessible way of doing it.
Yeah.
What's your beef?
And then you start trying to create that was supposed to be a kind of Rungler sequencer. Just doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
At all. Doesn't work.
Cool idea though.
Yeah, cool.
Lovely idea.
That one, I can't remember. That was another Rungler sequencer that didn't work. Now that's a good one. That is a proper traditional patch card.
Okay.
That is literally a...
And so what I'm doing is I'm holding a PCB which just seems to have resistors just randomly sort of...
They're not random, they're deliberately placed.
Random. I know that. But then it has the word randomise with some zappy lines coming off.
And that is fantastic. You have it playing and you just plug that in, the whole thing goes mad.
What is it? What does it do?
So it's there are a bunch of random signals on an easel. This just routes them to cross modulation, envelope, tack time, decay time, the modulator oscillator depth, the modulator oscillator. I'm not sure what that one is.
It sends random to all the settings.
It's more randoms than you can plug into it yourself. And it just immediately goes...
You put it on both mode and then it just... craziness.
It makes all the controls still work and it'll do things.
Yeah.
But it just adds ridiculousness to it.
It feels like the dream instrument for you, just the music keys.
I have really enjoyed it. It's been I like
of this.
Yeah, I like the fact you can extend it. But it does feel substantially limited. It's like...
Yeah.
Also, I don't know if it's all of them, but certainly my one, it is so lo-fi. Like,
really?
There's just kind of noise on things. There's kind of just grit on everything. There's lots of bleed between different things. I do find that slightly... I mean, I'm not normally very hi-fi.
Feel better than some of the ones, the newer ones that I've felt.
Yeah.
Some of the newer ones.
It feels nice. It's very nice. You know, it's fine. It was made by Logan Erickson and me and Finley, and it all works, I think. But it's just like...
It was made by Committee.
Yeah, there's a lot of just... I just kind of feel like I'd like to turn the reverb up and not get a lot of one of the oscillators bleeding into the reverb. I'd like to...
You were just telling me earlier that we should just tell people you should simplify devices and dictate it a little bit more. So,
well, I think with that, I think that is a really good example of exactly that. It's that there are loads of, and I found when I got into it, there are some really, there's a fantastic thing from a enormous dork perspective, which is like it's got two filters on it, these sort of non-resonant, very simple low-pass filters. As you play with it, and if you put the switches in a certain way, you realise that one of those filters is out of phase with the other one, which means if you patch the same signal into both of them, which there is a switch to do, it becomes a high-pass filter. It's those sorts of things. But it's quite a crappy high-pass filter. You kind of think, I'd actually quite like a slightly nicer one. But I think as a device and as a kind of... And the fader thing, the fact you can just kind of scrunch massive controls together. It's really interesting. You can literally just be like...
Get all your fingers across them.
You can do that. That, I think, is amazing, really. And that being able to go from, one thing to something very different is really interesting. But I sort of felt like...
When was it designed?
72, 74?
I was looking this up because I was looking up the 2600.
Yeah. Is
apparently the first example of semi-normal synthesis.
Well, that definitely is as well.
I mean, but like
that's totally normal.
70, because that was the 2600 is 71.
Okay.
So, and then
if your claim is that Buchler saw that and copied it, I don't think that's going to be the answer.
Do you reckon?
Nah, he'll have. I suppose the other thing is he would that. I suppose that is one device. In some ways, it's not. I suppose it's like it's not a modular at all, and that's what I mean by the limitation. You can't. You can't decide to run the sequencer off the oscillator. That's not a thing that can be done.
Yeah.
You can't say I'm going to run the sequencer at audio rates because I'll just do that. I mean, there's some ways you can sort of get around it, but it's very different. And I think that's what I've so kind of internalized, first from having a Nord modular and then having real modular, is that idea of why on earth wouldn't you... I mean, I particularly find it with the Prophet 6, which sounds beautiful and is wonderful, but like, why can't I FM the speed of the envelopes with a I wouldn't... Why can't I feed everything back into everything else? Why can't I just sort of... That's the kind of what I intuitively imagine doing, and I'm kind of always surprised that I can't do that. But that is quite a niche.
A modular synthesizer, Pat.
Yeah, I should.
But then why, you might ask them, why have I just spent the last 2.5 years assembling a modular synthesizer and not producing any music? It's like,
yes.
Had you owned or just bought a Prophet 6? I might add, the man who you were talking about making an album in an evening. It's like the guy, I read an article about a man who is making an album a day.
Oh, yes.
You saw that?
Yeah.
Album a day. And they sound samey, and he has enough time for like a 2-hour walk, in the middle of the day. I was just like, fair play, and he's getting a lot of plays on Spotify because he makes ambient music, and it's gotten put on Spotify playlists by whatever, nefarious agent in Spotify.
I'm sure he's not just an AI though.
Well, the fact that
it's just an AI generator. Got some geezer
sounds very, very of a type. And it's like a Prophet 6, a guitar, a couple of nice pedals and Logic, and that's it. And you just sort of maybe a piano, and you just feel like soft tinkly jams. 3 minutes, fades it in, 3 minutes, fades it out. Throw it on the pile. Never looks back. Never listens to it once it's done. Just like tops and tails.
That's right. I mean, that's good.
Out and done.
Just we were saying earlier. That's the way he is genuinely productive.
$20 out of DistroKid or whatever for like.
Exactly.
It's amazing, and I envy that. And actually, I have been doing some one of the things of my studio has been the ability to have a jamming station. Something part of my mind, I was like, right, there'll be one wall will have my computer in editing. The other wall will have like my 90s super production setup with a circle on and a Mackie and loads of synths and samplers and stuff. The back wall will have a table to do modular videos and table that is set up for video. But on the fourth wall, there will be a noise table. And the noise table will just have a Mackie and a recorder, and it will be about plonk something down, make a whimsical setup. And to be fair, actually, what I've done is I've made a little like jamming setup with like iPads.
Oh yes,
and so it's like I feel I need to stress like
you're doing the decades, aren't you? You've got the 90s one with the rompers and the Mackie,
early noughties,
and this is your early noughties table.
Kind of is. I mean, my real early noughties was like Cubase, crack Cubase on an old Windows PC and a sampler and stuff.
I love, you've seen Suren, my Panda Shall Fly, is doing gigs with old 90s, MacBooks and 90s software.
I mean, I have an eBay search for the Pismo MacBook because I wanted to basically get the same era of laptop that like Aphex would have done Drux on. And then get like, whatever the tracker is called, the Player Pro, and just like have a dirty. There's also an amazing picture of what's his chops from Eric Persing from Spectrasonics.
Okay.
Spectrasonics. They make Trillion and what's it called? The thing that Omnisphere, where the album was made and it's Omnisphere. And basically there's an amazing picture of him in like the late 90s, and he's sat like cross-legged in like a bright sunny Californian thing. He's got these like in a park, and he's got these weird like shades on, and he's got a Mac, and he's doing some DSP stuff, just like smashing some weird sounds through some weird
amazing
like 90s DSP. And I was just like, that's actually kind of cool in a way, and that's my Panda Shall Fly is kind of embracing this era of technology. Another thing is that I got a Nord Lead 2, and I have to say, of all of the synths that I've acquired, that one is the one that sparks
the most joy. Has it got the wooden wiggly stick?
Yeah, wooden
and the stone
and wood. It has. It is weird how much it fills me with joy when I look at it, when I interact with it. I really, really like it for some reason, and a part of it is nostalgia for the era when I first got into electronic music, which was the late 90s, and you'd have like Left Field, and you'd see these bands, and you'd see the red keyboard on stage, and then when you actually get one, they sound amazing. And they are garbage in terms of their DSP cycles, aren't they?
The first synth I ever had was a Elysis Ion. Which sounded incredible to me. Amazing. And just sounds absolutely brilliant. And I remember I got rid of that and got G2.
Oh.
And the G2 is amazing and fascinating and interesting. Doesn't sound big and chunky and warm and nice.
No. I imagine it sounds weird. I've also got a Nord Micro Modular. I think I'm also partly responsible for the Red 8 Mu.
Yes, I think that was like, definitely you and Steve. I knew nothing about it. And she was like,
I posted about it, and Steve was like, I've been like looking at these now. I was like, I don't know how it came about, but then very quickly there was a red one.
Exactly. It was a great surprise to me, but I was very pleased with them.
But the Micro Modular, I mean, it's amazing. Even now, it is... but then there are it's not a joke, but there are things like it. Like there's various little like boutique-y things with screens where you can plug together modules and make little virtual things, and you've got like the Eventide H8000 or H9000 where you can plug together very high cost.
Have you seen, that funny, there's a kind of very boutique-y thing like a Game Boy that's got a little crank on the side.
Yeah.
Or Playdate.
Yeah. It's not a teenage engineering thing.
They've probably got something to do with it.
But it's have a thing to do with everything like that.
There's a guy I can't remember where he is. He's a British guy who's made a modular for that looks absolutely amazing. It's like little modules that you plug together, and it's all on that Playdate. I've no idea what the interface. I think actually he had specifically changed the hand crank for a Davies knob.
Oh, very nice.
To make it more knobby, but it looks amazing. I need to find him and dig more into
I have a circuit bent speak and spell that's got knobs on the sides. That is quite like
definitely the way to go.
But yeah, the Nord lead surprised me because it sounded really good.
So why did you buy it? Because you knew it sounded good, or did you?
It was just
nostalgia?
one of those bits of gear that I just lusted after. I was like,
are they cheap?
Yeah, they're pretty cheap. They are pretty cheap. Like a few £100. They still have a bit of value because people love them, and it's irrational. And the joke is I post on my Instagram, and then Neil Barnes from Left Field comments on the things. He's like, and actually Neil was like, I love the Nord Lead 1 because the 1's got a better sound than the 2.
Of course.
And I mean, and this is how it always starts, but obviously, maybe it's affectation. It's just like, I love the 1, but
you haven't got the shiny converters that you get.
Yeah.
It's like
the Burr Browns.
When I had a DX7 II, it was like, it's just
exactly.
too polished, but I wanted polished. It's a DX7.
Yeah, I like the fuzz of the DX, the 1, the brown one, the chocolate one.
The brown ones.
So,
I did get rid of that.
My point is that
I was wondering what the point was.
So the point is that the cycles don't matter. The chef matters, which is something I've talked about endlessly, but it bears repeating when people complain about specs. They complain about specs.
The only people who complain about it are people on internet forums. I mean, it's not.
Who don't really make music.
It's not. But it's not whether they do or they don't.
It's like complaining this. Do people maybe they don't complain, but this has a restricted sample memory of 64.
So funny. People were like,
megabytes.
Why does it run? Because it runs at some really weird rate.
Yeah.
It's runs at 53.2 kilohertz or something.
Maybe that's just the optimal.
Sure, that's how they've done it for that price.
Why does it run at that rate?
I don't know, but it will be because the main chip and the codec that does the in and out, they needed to get them together at the optimal speed, and for some reason it ended up being that rather than being 48K or whatever.
I suppose what I'm
the samples are just normal samples.
I guess I'm speaking to the same thing that people might have an issue with. This is only 64 megabytes, where it's just my goodness,
how many do you want?
Yeah, well, Big Loader from Square Pusher was made on a sampler that's 1.5 megabytes.
Yeah,
and it's a drum and bass Odyssey that sort of
But presumably an MPC didn't have MPC 60 wouldn't have had 64 megabytes.
I don't know what they had, but I bet it was dick all. And that's the point. It's just specs don't matter. Specs don't matter. Specs don't matter. Just interface matters. Interface. But coming back to the iPad is the fact that.
So you're saying it's important to have knob per function, maybe switches, that sort of thing, rather than these kind of complicated menus, lots of little buttons on them.
This is sort of an internal joke that you're making. I mean, I think there are compromises.
It's an endless. It's basically the Eurorack story.
There are compromises that you make compromises somewhere. Otherwise, everything would be 62 HP.
I mean that is a really interesting. If you spend any time with it, there is a lot to learn in that. And this has definitely got the optimum kind of interface that they would have done. You see where they've done it like that. They didn't make it twice as big. They didn't make it too small. But there is an awful lot to kind of remember in that, and a lot of kind of. When
you say a lot to learn, you mean that the interface is quite tricky.
The interface. It's not that it's tricky. It's just it's a complicated device, and there is a lot of when you're editing. When you're editing samples on it because the actual screen is the 3-digit numbers. You've seen this is not a screen. This is just LEDs.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So literally, you've got a tiny little 3-digit display, and then a load of white LEDs and a coloured plastic sheet over them.
Well, that's
it's
quite
genius. I mean,
very
absolute
efficient.
Genius.
It gets around the need to have like custom LCD, right? Which those
exactly.
are the most
Cost a
expensive
fortune,
parts of those, like.
And it does actually mean you've got a lot of like it's not one button per thing, but you've got a lot of features and functions that you can see are displayed on there, because it will have, like weird things will come on. If you're recording in a certain way, it's got its own light. If you're recording a different way, it's got its own light, all that stuff.
I like that. When you mute it, it's like wink, 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 I'm muted, and then that's cute.
But it is a really complicated thing, and it's got loads of like things that it can do, and there's an awful lot to learn.
Do you like it? Do you think it?
I think it's an absolutely phenomenal object and a thing that they've made for that price, and they've done it. And the kind of, as with all of their stuff, the kind of chutzpah of coming up with that is absolutely brilliant.
Like actually making it look like a calculator as well.
Making it like a calculator, and it's Lego compatible. It's got.
Is it?
I mean, it's literally Lego. Look, take this off.
What?
That's Lego. You can build Lego onto all of it. It's absolutely brilliant. But I had an MPC years ago, and just not very good at making. Well, I'm not very good at making music generally, but I'm really not very good at making.
You find
hip-hop with
this style of device.
I found, like, I've also got the M8 tracker, and I found I enjoyed more kind of sprinkling random like pitch shifts and stuff into a grid. Produced for me stuff that was more pleasing and surprising for me to do it, because I just, you see people making, like, I watched Magpie's video with this. Who's it? Anyway, somebody did an introduction video. I kind of watched it and all the way through it, and he just like taps in a beat, and his beat sounds really good, and I tap in a beat and it sounds really lame. I was like, just the basic ability of just, you've got a click going, and you tap some sounds into it. I was like, I'm just not.
This is too. I keep using the word prescriptive to describe.
No, it's not at all that. It's literally, for me, I don't feel like
you want it to be more generative.
Yes, for me personally, I'm not, talented at being able to just sit there and go.
I mean,
and you just go, this is great.
Circa 1996. That's not great.
Whereas obviously for plenty of people they are. But I mean, you can, if we just, this should be something blank now. So okay, there you go. You make us a beat. So you just hold down record and tap play.
What do you mean?
Like that. Now you're off.
See, I want a Zoxy. I don't want to play it by hand. I just want to. Do you mean that?
That's what I mean. That's what that's why I like. For me personally,
you're a programmer.
I enjoyed the kind of tracker thing of just sprinkling stuff in the old, see what it is. But I would probably enjoy music made on this more. It's just, for me personally, I find it difficult, and I find it kind of. It's not as joyful as it would be if I was more confident doing that, I suppose. Yeah.
I mean, we all have different ways of making music, or different things that we're...
What I also love is the similarities within that and this, though, 'cause it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And the crazy stuff on here, like when it's got the effects on there, where you just hold down effects and press a key and the whole screen kind of flips out if you're playing it. I mean, you can't... That stuff that's so immediate and so fun. We're not demonstrating it to its best ability, I think, now.
What do you mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so much fun.
It's hard to say who it's for, in a way. Like, it's...
I think if you were into it and you got it and you had, a sense of rhythm and the ability to make music, it would be brilliant.
I guess what I mean is it looks so extreme that you have to ask is this actually for musicians, or is this I suppose that's on one level. I'm being cynical here, but do you know what I mean? It's like
You mean
it looks
they should
so
do a
unlike-
shiny black version of it? That
Maybe
people be like,
it just
this
looks
is
boring. Like,
Yeah.
it looks super boring. Just so people are like, oh, okay, this is a real musical instrument.
so clever. The design, it's got this thing where if you press the front of a key, it has a pressure sensor, so you can, where there's effects, you hold it down and you can do like after touch pressure on it. And the back of the key, it doesn't, because it was cheaper to just do the front.
But
So
you still get the
you still get the exact effect, and it like they've created an entire. It's like a computer keyboard, like you'd have in a mechanical keyboard, but with this little touch sensitive strip. It's amazing. I mean, just I am so in awe of what they do, and the fact that they, as we've said lots of times before, the way they play at both ends. They're like, we're going to make the best possible weird handheld recorder thing we can. We're going to mill it out of aluminium,
an amazing
and it's
device,
going to
isn't
cost £1,500 or whatever. And we're going to make a thing the size of a little tiny calculator that costs £60, and also we'll make an MPC that costs £300
$299
and is Lego compatible. It's just, I think it's so brilliant.
Yeah. It is funny to me how people don't understand why a weird niche sort of Swedish boutique tiny Nagra like polished Swiss watch device might cost money.
£100. Yeah, exactly.
Why is that not £100?
What do they think a Nagra cost when it was new and had a use?
Yeah, exactly. Good grief. But yeah, exactly. And also they're doing like we saw this like rabbit thing.
Yes.
Which looks crackers. They're doing like industrials and that cranky thing. I'm pretty sure as a teenager.
Yeah, it's something to do with
I don't
them.
know how many of them there are, but like, or where they, they're obviously doing a lot of work.
And they will have sold an enormous number of those as well. And they had some kind of packaging QC challenges with it when it came out.
Apparently, yes.
But the ability to ship and on that scale is just incredible.
Where do they get them made? Are they made in China?
It must be made in China, I'm sure. They've got some business in. I think they've got a fulfillment thing in Barcelona or something now.
Yeah, made in Spain.
It says made in Spain.
Made in Spain.
Amazing.
So yes, Barcelona. Perhaps.
Yeah.
Is that because of this is the whole reason you have like Bifaco and stuff? There are sort of grants or something about Spain sort of that encourages business development.
Don't know. I know Bifaco
sure.
had, I think, space initially was in a kind of communal kind of counts. But I mean, similarly, like Thonk's space is owned by Brighton Council.
Oh, is it?
It's all that sort of thing. You do feel like you're going to break it when you take it.
Yeah, I did feel a little bit like
fine.
it's going to smash. So you've been on sabbatical.
Yes.
You just gave up on the world of work. I changed my job as well.
Yeah,
I was going to ask you about the sabbatical thing, and like
in kind of May last year, literally read an article in a magazine that said you should take a sabbatical. And I really clearly remember it, just reading and going, yes, I should do that. And I wasn't. It was kind of because I enjoy my day job. I enjoy what I do, and I've talked about it before. These kind of things. I enjoy the variety and the doing interesting stuff, and a lot of it is quite kind of purposeful, and it's a good thing to be doing. But I was a bit like, what I need to do is have a space to work out what I'm going to do for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? Because I've had all these different careers kind of in the past of journalism and magazines and newspapers and stuff, and then the kind of consulting I'm doing. And I feel like I've kind of bounced between them. And I was thinking, I've always been in a position where I've been laid off or I left a company and I need to find a new job.
Yeah, it wasn't a purpose.
And I always absolutely needed to find it. And it wasn't, and I can look back at it and say, why wasn't I clever? I moved from this area to this area, and this area was great. But it was pretty kind of, doing it as it came up. And I thought the idea of being able to try things, being able to focus a bit and think differently was quite interesting. What I found really interesting is that the ideas I had at the start have not necessarily particularly kind of played out into what I've done. I've definitely the last kind of 3-4 months been really focused on designing a complicated new music thing, which I don't want to get too much into here because it will come out when it's more finished.
I will say it is It is pretty damn cool.
But it's having that ability to say, I am literally, I mean, I was saying to you earlier, I literally will get up in the morning and spend 4 hours thinking about a particular voltage regulator. And I'm like, I need this voltage regulator. I want to make sure that it's available. I want to make sure that I've got the pins right. I want to make sure that I get one that costs tuppence rather than 15 pence, because you do that over and over again and it, will be 10, 15, 20 quid on the price of the thing at the end. And that ability to just, whereas in the past, I'd have been like, what did Emily use? I'll use that. Literally, as I think many of us in this world. Like, wow. If she's using it, it's fine, it's kosher. And I'm now looking at it going, well, that one she's using, that costs 45 pence. I'm not going to spend 45 pence on one of these. I've got to find one for tuppence somewhere. But obviously also asking much more interesting questions about like, what is this for? How will this work? And then the thing that's been really interesting is the kind of collaborating with people. So there's people on the kind of hardware side, there's a sort of software angle to it, and meeting people and saying, there is, I'm doing a thing. Do you want to get involved in it?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's that deliberate, but sometimes also it's just I've just had the time to say, I'm just going to go and meet interesting people, and it's literally like, there's a I can't remember what it's called. There's a kind of experimental instruments lab in Reykjavik. And I was like, that looks awesome. Who do I know there? Who can I talk to there?
So did you go?
No, I didn't go there. But I had a really nice chat with the guy one of the guys working there. We're just talking about what he's doing, how he got into it. He kind of explained that whole kind of academic world. Because another thing I'm wondering about is, should I, is that an area I can do something in? Talking to people about goldsmiths and things. I'm not sure I want to become an academic, but there's a lot of people doing a lot of really interesting, clever stuff in academic worlds, and something I've done during my day job is that kind of connect. How do you connect somebody with an interesting idea with, can they produce something from that? Can they sell it? Can they do something interesting with it? Mm. So there's a lot there, I think, and I think that for me has made a big difference, is between me sitting there going, I'm going to make this thing. I think when I started, I was like, I'm going to make this thing and I'm going to have the time to focus on it and do it right. Now I'm much more like, well, that's fine, but actually, can I collaborate with people? Can I talk to interesting people? Can I make something that feels a bit bigger than here's my new module? And that's been really exciting and really kind of rewarding, and really sort of like, I'm just at the moment really kind of super excited about that side of things. And I'm in a kind of race to get a kind of first prototype. Well, I've done the first prototype. Do the first prototype doesn't work. The second prototype will probably be better than the first prototype. And you kind of go through that cycle. And the sort of highs and lows of that journey are so amazing, because you have this idea, you're really excited about it, then you put it together and kind of make it work on a bit of breadboard, and you're like, great, this is going to be cool. And then you send it off to get made, and then it comes back and it just doesn't work. It's really sad and frustrating. And then you kind of put it on a, I normally try and, you need to sort of leave it to percolate in the back of your mind for a week or two. And then you go back to it and think, right, I'm going to spend the afternoon really trying to work out what on earth has gone wrong. Why on earth does this not do what I want it to do? And it'll be things like, one of the things, it has an oscillator on it. You plug in the oscillator, the really bad thing always happens when you do this, you hear a thump. You're like, I mean, it's not very oscillatory, and it means it's probably more like 12 volts or minus 12 volts. It doesn't sound very good. You plug it in here, that doesn't sound good, and then you feel, well, there's definitely nothing oscillating here. And I found with that, it has a little double transistor in it, like most oscillators do. And it turns out they make double transistors. Most of them are in this really sensible layout, where essentially you can put it in either way, and it's kind of reversible. It's like, why wouldn't you lay it out like that? Some they just do them differently. So I had just picked one that did it differently. So you then have to go in with your tweezers and desolder. Well, you have to order the replacement ones, wait a week for them to come. Then you go and desolder them, put it in, let it cool down a bit, plug it in, and then it oscillates. And that is the best, that kind of roller coaster. I was talking about this one of it has this thing with kind of buttons that you press and signals come out of them. And that, I kind of had this idea of this weird thing that nobody's done before. I made it sort of on breadboard to just prove the basic principles of it. Designed it, sent it off, came back, did absolutely nothing. I mean, it literally was just like completely dead. And that took a lot of fiddling with it. But then when you get that working, and then I had it sat there plugged into other things, I was like, this is quite a fun little thing. This is quite an interesting, very weird interface, very small little thing that you could imagine people using and enjoying. And so that kind of roller coaster of the highs of the inventing, and then the possibly even bigger high that when you debug something that hasn't worked, it is so pleasing. It's just like, now I have it, now it operates. Particularly when it's just really weird things that are well beyond the limits of my understanding. I had these envelopes in it that basically worked fine. As you turn them up, it goes faster and faster. There's this weird like step. So you imagine they're kind of in audio rate by this, and it kind of go, and I was like, that kind of works. It's fine, really. Nobody's gonna put it on a oscilloscope and look at it. It basically is fine. And then I put it on the oscilloscope, and it's quite weird what it's doing with its. It's like its waveforms were really odd when it went over this kind of step. I was like, I have no notion of what this could possibly be. I'd read in a description about something totally different the phrase speed up capacitor. I was like, I have no idea what a speed up capacitor is, but that's the kind of idea. Maybe it needs to be sped up. It's going fast. Anyway, I was like fiddling with this thing, and then I was soldering something to it, so I really heated it up. So it was like literally, I mean, not red hot, but it was really hot. Plugged it in while it was really hot, and it worked perfectly. The step had gone, it just went faster and faster very smoothly. And then you could see it on the oscilloscope as it cooled down, the weird waveform reappeared, and then once it was room temperature, it had this weird step back in it. Anyway, with my one knowledge of there is a thing called a speed-up capacitor, I look at it and I go, what if I put a capacitor there? And this is all this kind of tiny, tiny little circuit board. Shoehorn in this capacitor, solder it in, plug it in. It worked perfectly.
What is
the step had gone? I don't really know. I guess it must mean because it's like oscillating, as it's oscillating at a particular speed, maybe it kind of shorts. I really don't know. I mean, I literally heard the phrase, and I looked at the way it's used in some oscillators is quite different. It wraps around a kind of transistor. But I just kind of tried, and you imagine at that point, I was just like, this is so brilliant. I am a genius.
This is basically when I see your like completed projects, I'm just like, how has anyone ever designed this? And I now realise that you sort of don't know what you're doing.
I mean, that's the thing with now. I do understand iterate. More and more and more, and that's the thing. Each time you do it, and each time I do a failed project, and I have now been doing it for like 10
years of failed projects.
It is one of those things where if you do literally think about electronics for 10 years, there's quite a lot of stuff that stores up. But it is that kind of, I mean, that was a really unusual experience because the heat thing was so weird. It was like, there must be something here that can work. And I'd kind of, there's a kind of basic design for how like those surge slopes work. It's that sort of circuit, but with quite a lot of different variations on it. And I'd done this thing to make it do what I wanted it to do in the first place. And this was kind of bolting things onto that. And it was, but yeah, just so pleasing. Such a joy. And then obviously I then have to send that prototype off, and we'll see if it still continues to work with the extra.
I will look for that capacitor and smile at it. But regarding a sabbatical, though, it sounds like what are your do you have conclusions at this point?
No, I definitely don't. And
what have you learned about work, I suppose, is the question.
I think there's something about that being able to absolutely focus. I think also there's something about, I can't really get it, but there's something about sort of levels of ambition, I think. Like ambition in terms of ambition to do something good rather than to get the next job. I think when you're in a cycle and you're in a job, and I would have that with the sort of day job I was doing, where you're always like, you can kind of see there is a amazing version, and there is the version that you're doing, which you're proud of and is good, and then there's a kind of crappy version. You're like, well, I'm not doing the crappy version, I'm doing a good version, I'm proud of it. But you can kind of see over the horizon or upstairs there is a kind of, wouldn't it be awesome if we did that? But you don't, because you're on a cycle and on a kind of, process. And for me, when I was doing modules for like 2 hours every morning, it was good and I was able to make things happen. But I mean, like, this thing took 4 years.
You're holding the 8 mu.
The 8 mu took 4 years and it's finished. I'm proud of it and it's good that it came out, but it really didn't need to take 8 years.
Yeah.
4 years.
4 years to make.
Whereas like the twin drive, which is 2 mini drives in a module, took, a week to make or something. And we sold more mini drives than we did 8 MUs, I think, last year.
I mean, this is a perennial problem. Like the music that you spend 5 minutes writing, and it's like it's your nest egg for the rest of your life, versus the album, your difficult concept album that you're so proud of, and everyone's like, play the hits.
But I suppose it's the what I meant about ambition then is if you're on a cycle and you're doing things, or if you've got a limited chunk of time, you're as ambitious as you can be. And like that AMU was it wasn't ambitious in that it was sort of super difficult, but it was like, I have in my mind a thing and I will make that thing real.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of kind of complicated things around like editors and stuff that made that take a long time. What I've found being able to really focus on something is that the level of ambition can rise, but not in a sort of linear thing. It's not like, I've got plenty of time, I can try something a bit more difficult. It's that because you're spending so much time thinking about it and developing it, my ambition for the thing I'm designing now is bigger than it was last week, because I've thought about it more.
Yeah.
And I've thought of things that can come around how it's launched, or things that come across how people use it, or how people connect when they're using it, those sorts of things. That's gone up and up and up. So the original kind of level of ambition I had for it was like, okay, I've got time, I could do something a bit sort of bigger. But as you spend time, it becomes substantially bigger. So to some extent now I'm looking and going, well, actually, is this the thing I'm going to do for the next 5 years? This kind of
that thing?
That
or you mean
thing,
this style
well,
of working?
it's not that thing as a designed piece of electronics, but there's potentially elements of kind of community and events and the ways people work around something like that you go, well, actually, maybe that is a career. Whereas for me, I'm going to make another module and then great, I can make 10 modules rather than 4 modules. Didn't particularly feel like something I wanted to focus on. When all the different ways of doing it. So like if I go and see Matthew at ALM, he has built a real proper substantial business, employing really smart people in a nice space, building beautiful things that lots of people use. That's very different from what I do. I design things and then make them. So that's the thing he's built. I'd say he's built that business rather than building a series of modules. And as far as a career, that feels like 100% a proper career. Whereas for me, it didn't necessarily feel like make more modules more often was quite the thing. But occasionally with the thing I'm thinking on now, you think, well, actually, maybe there is something that is a bit bigger to that might be interesting.
I mean, it sounds like you're reflecting on the fact that you know, as we get older, there's now a thing, we think more about family. We also, you know, as we approach the end of our 40s, you know, we're just like, we're over the hump, and we've definitely exceeded the mean life expectancy for humankind. So you do just think about what is actually a better legacy, or is this what it sounds like? That's what
I don't know if it's legacy. I think it's more.
Well, just that you want to leave the world a better place.
So it's a bit of purpose. It's like what, because I think I was quite aware of, you know, in my day job, I was working with like the National Grid, or working with health companies, or working with, you know, big, you know, government agencies, those sorts of things. That feels quite sort of purposeful and important. To some extent, you know, am I going to make a new distortion module that is nice and it's got a cool light on it? It's fun. That's nice and it's good, and I enjoy that as a thing, but it didn't necessarily feel like...
To make the world a better place.
It does for people who want a nice...
Really nice distortions.
I think it does make the world a little bit of a better place.
Okay, good point.
But maybe there's a more interesting, broader question.
Well, it's this question of like, if you compare designing a distortion module to a year of charity work.
Yeah.
There's two very different propositions, and I had like a really profound experience doing charity work, where like I volunteered in a warehouse in Calais for like 4 days, putting together like health kits for migrants, and it was weirdly like the best working experience of my entire life.
Yeah,
I felt the most fulfilled. I felt like high as a kite. It was really weird.
Yeah. When was that?
That was several years ago.
Yeah.
4 or 5 years ago now. But just for a weekend, and it did make me think. I was like, well, yeah, and that's I've quit my job, and I'm like doing my own crazy sort of YouTube thing as a full-time job, and I think, I don't know, like
And how are you finding that now?
Good. I'm definitely... I wanted to do it for a variety of reasons, but like the flexibility and just... And like not being beholden to just like a brutal, pointless, arbitrary schedule that is just sort of inherited from the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
And just, you know, the fact that I could be like, right, I need to go to the doctor's because my eardrum's perforated.
Yeah.
And the fact that when I need to just go for a doctor's appointment, I don't have to say to my boss, is it all right if I make the time up to go and look after my health? You know, I'm sorry to have stolen time from you.
I mean, like, my day job, I didn't have to do that sort of thing.
No, I know that. But,
they would trust you and they'd understand that you're not just going to wander off. And if you are wandering off,
there's probably a good
you're
reason.
going to make stuff happen.
But that's not the same with a lot.
It's not the same with lots of jobs.
It's true.
Sure.
And some companies are really cool. And I've worked in a number of different companies with varying degrees of quality. I suppose I can definitely say, like, I've had some okay managers.
Yeah.
But I've never, like, and weirdly, like, the best, basically, there's a lot of managers who are, and I discovered this term recently, accidental managers.
Absolutely. And it's terrible.
Have you ever had a good manager?
I have had good managers, but I've had, I mean, you can imagine the media industry is terrible for, find somebody who's good at writing articles.
Yeah. Then
get them to make a magazine. Well, that's two totally different sets of skills to start with. Then, if they're really good at that, maybe give them a company to run and who's responsible for hiring and firing and budget. And you're like, that's just the worst possible
set of skills.
It would be, you know, it's mad. I was going to say it'd be like getting somebody who's good at playing football and making them manage a club. But
no. But this is my problem. I've done it for a long time, and it's just like I'm sort of sick of that thing, of that like lottery. It's like trying to, you know, moving into a flat, not knowing who your flatmates are. But the fact of the matter is, it's just like, I wanted to leave that world, and I was sick of the hours and this like, and you know, I guess it's because I had a side hustle, as it were, because I had this.
It's very cycle driven. That sort of any of that kind of marketing world is always like. It's a constant loop, isn't there?
Yep, and then there's also things like there's a way that your manager likes things to be, and there's a reluctance to change things, or if you go, I really think we should be doing something very different here. Like, well, I disagree, and you just that whole thing of you're beholden to someone else's impressions on how you should do your job best. Or worst of all, you're a management in absentia, i.e. a manager, and I've had that too, where a manager just simply is not available and just doesn't manage.
I think that's what I mean about that when I was talking about ambition, that idea of you can be in that kind of environment and you can be doing well and everyone says you're doing fine and it's great and you're like, it's all good, but you have that little nagging notion of something better. But then it takes a long time to then actually have the kind of freedom and the bandwidth and the space to go, the ambition wasn't this thing here, it's this thing over here. It's totally different. That is actually a much bigger, more interesting thing. I think that's the thing you only get from having that space. Has your idea of what you want to do changed since you stopped that?
No, but I'm only 6 months into it, so it's too soon to say. Other than
much of that's been building your...
And I had to build a down studio as well, and that has been like a time sink. But it's like, I don't know. And something that I thought to myself is like, I might have time to do some volunteering, like volunteer and do, I would like to do some volunteering and bring a modular synth or Ableton Live, and this is how you make music because. But then I'm also conscious that just making YouTube videos is kind of doing that. But doing it in
teaching,
person
isn't it?
would be helpful. It would be good. I think I'd feel better. But as you say, like when you're your own boss, you do have the capacity to actually work that way. You do have the capacity to go away and just think. And take some time and that has been the greatest thing is like I have had the flexibility. I can be like, right, no, I'm going to drop this and work on something else, or I've got to take the kids somewhere and do something today. Or my brother's here, I'll spend an hour with him. And, I don't have to rush back to my desk in that sense. And just those little, but then it's taken so much work to get to the point where, and for yourself, it's no trivial thing to be able to have the money to basically to take time off like that. So it's so easy to
buying
say.
a year is quite a weird, very weird, disconcerting thing to do. You obviously have to be in a certain position to be able to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Not very few people. But then actually part of leaving London, one of the reasons was to live somewhere more affordable, so that I didn't have to work as much because of that whole like being held to ransom by your rent thing.
Well, one of the things is by being really old like me, you might get to the point where you paid off your mortgage because that helps.
That's delightful.
You do have to be quite old.
Okay. Well, I'm not quite there yet, unfortunately. I'm just actually I'm glad I got a mortgage, but I don't know, but I definitely know that I have a sense that as soon as I did it, as soon as I quit, I was like, this is fucking brilliant. This is this is great. And I'm not worried about the money side of it in the sense that I have enough like work that I think it's going to be okay. I don't foresee some huge drought of like things that can afford, make me money. But I don't know what the ultimate, these are the questions. I'm like 40, and so I'm just like, you get to a point where you then start asking questions about your life, and I've got kids, and what's the future, and what will be a better thing.
The kids get older and disappear off as well. That's the funny thing. They just don't need so much care to be taken of them.
Well, which is to say, I suppose, yes, me and my wife especially will have more time. But I don't know what the answer of what we should do with our lives is.
No, I don't think we're going to solve that today.
I don't think we can try, but
so for you, with the thing you're doing, that ambition question, if you had, suddenly you had, Mr. Beast's budget for things, and you had infinite time, and you had infinite, space and sidekicks to do your editing for you, do you have ideas for the things that you would do?
I have probably a list of about 150 video ideas.
But are they the ones you're doing now, but more of them, or is it fundamentally, if I was to do something it's like one of the things I found funny was people. I saw a meme that was talking about my dream. In the meme was a house in the country and an M8 tracker, and that idea of space, time, privacy, and focus to try and do something. I thought that was that's always interesting thinking about doing kind of retreats and stuff. That idea of you give us some money, you can come and sit in a house, and you can just focus on this and nothing else.
I
thought that was an interesting idea of something that clearly people would strive for and would look for.
Oh yeah. Well, the best thing about university was that I had time to just fart around and do things. I made music there as well, but I wasn't there to do music. But time was the thing. Time to just, I didn't have to go to work and I was just doing the creative thing. That was absolutely the best part of it. Not necessarily what I did, and certainly not the teaching or anything, but it was the time.
So now you have the time.
I do. And that is the point. And I am able. Things like my jamming table are a direct that's me going, I've wanted to do this for ages. I want this particular kind of setup, and I have taken time where I have no commercial. Basically, I should be doing demos. Yeah. I've taken some time to do that because it's really important to because basically you can't. I'm not interested in just making demos of things. I also want to have a practice. It's essential that I have I actually do these things. You can't just be like bellend on the internet who just tells you what to do.
That's the thing. I've decided I'm not going to have a musical practice because I really can't.
Well, that's fine, and that's fair enough. But I really do want a musical practice, and it will inform videos. But there's another book. I read this book, 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman.
Right.
Which I don't know if you read that book, but I can't recommend it enough. It's the best thing I've read all year and probably all last year, and probably since we last actually were physically in the same room together. Actually, that was a Mastrina Bastronica, so it was, but before then.
Yes.
That book is basically about the sort of the hustle culture and the fact that it's okay to have a hobby that you're not good at.
Yes, absolutely.
And many things, but its main sort of thrust is it's an antithesis to this sort of do more, work hard, hustle, and the fact that holidays should only be seen as permissible because they're recharging you to come back and work harder as a good little drone when your holiday is over. And it's absolutely anti that. And
that creativity to no particular purpose, I think, is so important. Robin Sloan wrote a brilliant post a few years ago about software as home cooking. And so what he has built for himself, for his family, a video sharing app because he can, and his family want to post videos to each other and say, look, there's this thing, and for whatever reason they didn't want to do it on WhatsApp or anywhere else like that, and because he has the skills to do it, he goes on and he makes this app, and then they can distribute it to his family. It's got used by 5 people, and the App Store thinks it's a prototype, and so it overlooks it, that sort of thing. But his point was that's the difference. But he's not building it. He's not going to scale it. He's not going to sell it. He's not going to add features to it. He's not doing anything. It's not a business. Just like if I'm cooking something, I don't want to be a chef. I don't want to cook. I'm not looking going, well, it's fine. I've made this for 4 people, but what if how's it going to work for 400 people? It's no good. And that idea of making something for himself. For my dad, my dad's got really into poetry. Well, since he retired, which was years ago, he's very interested in poetry. He writes poetry, performs poetry, and he's been interested when I've done stuff in the past. Like years ago, I made a John Cage bot that just had a load of John Cage stuff and chopped it up and produced things that sound like John Cage, and he found that really fascinating. So this year for Christmas, I made him a little poetry generator machine. I'll send you a photo of it. You can flash up at that point. There's got a little e-paper screen, like a Kindle screen, a little solar panel I kind of found somewhere and connected in, and a battery inside. And it connects to Wi-Fi. And it essentially the way it works is the system reads The Guardian, it finds a random article in The Guardian, excluding sport and business, because they weren't very inspiring. So it finds an article, and then it sends it to ChatGPT, to OpenAI, through the API, and says, write a poem in the style of, and then I filled it with a great big list of like random poets. My dad was like, I don't want these. He gave me a list of very specific poets that he knows and he likes. So it says, write a poem in the style of, and one of those people. And it's amazing. I mean, it's really fascinating. What's really fascinating is because it's everything in The Guardian. So it will write a poem about like the crossword announcement. It'll write a poem about the weather. It'll write a poem about a letter. It'll write a poem about the front page news story about Gaza, whatever. And then it writes these poems, and it's just, I mean, they're not brilliant poems, but they are definitely poems. They're quite distinctive. The styles, you can tell the different style, like it does William Carlos Williams, it's quite different from somebody else. And it just does it like every hour and displays on the screen. But the point was, I made this thing, you know, it's a nice thing to do. It was like I learned a lot through the process. And fundamentally, all the code was written by ChatGPT for ChatGPT, because that's kind of how it works. And gave it to me. He's like, oh, this is amazing. It's great. You know, you should sell these. People are going to want these. And I'm like, I have no interest at all in doing that. A friend, Matt Webb, who's done a AI clock, and he is productizing it. He's building it, and another friend is writing some of the code for it. I'm like, I absolutely don't want to do that. I have no interest. It'd be nice if I need to send it to people at The Guardian, they can see it and they can go, that's nice, that's cool.
Give one to, like,
but it was just like that as an activity that I enjoyed and I learned, and I had a vague purpose of it to give my dad a Christmas present. But it's not a thing. That's not a business. That's not a hustle you want to get into. It's just a fun. I mean, imagine trying to go into business based on the ChatGPT API is not a good idea.
It's terrible. I suppose it's this idea. Well, one of the things that book talks about similarly is like, well, it doesn't use this as an example, does it? No. But I'm going to use it, which is something we talked about endlessly, which is just the fact that people have modular synths. It's like, it's okay to have a modular synth and not make music, just in the same way that people have guitars. And I mean, I don't know if you play these, but like, but lots of people have guitars, and no one berates them for not making music. I think there's been like a sort of weird. There has been a kind of I think because of the cost of living crisis, there's been in the last sort of year or two like a real rise in sort of anti-money things.
Yeah.
That is to say that anyone talking about anything that's slightly expensive or that someone has made something that is expensive. I mean, it has always existed to some degree. I remember when Moog released the like £10,000 gold mini Moog, there were people like, it's not like the greatest, but I'm Moog, by the way, got sold in music and went out of business.
Yeah.
But I suppose the point is just like, wait, what is the point? Oh no, I've lost it.
But isn't this just... It's just internet people say things on the internet. It's like, I think the idea of if you are presented with something and you're presented the opportunity to comment on it,
you take that as the opportunity to complain. But
also, if I leave a comment on it, if you look at all my comments on Instagram, they're generally me going, "Oh well, that's cool." I mean, it's not very interesting content. You know, amazing. Love this. That's literally all my comments. It's not good content for anyone.
So if I'm
the business, you could definitely make a Tom bot. It wouldn't be terribly interesting. Hopefully, the people who receive those comments are happy. They're like, that's nice.
That's the key distinction.
But it's not. And hopefully, to some extent, it's good for the platform because then they carry on creating things. And certainly, when I get those messages, I find it pleasing. But it's not content. You're asking somebody the opportunity to say, what can you say about this thing? That's the game they're playing, and you know that saying this is too expensive is much more interesting than you and me going, oh, it's really good that they've made that thing. And it's very understandable that it's quite expensive. And I can see that they've decided to make a metal table for £1,500
Yeah.
because have you seen how much expensive designer metal tables cost? It's about £1,500 actually. And they're quite good tables. That's not an interesting comment. It's just like us being smartasses.
The problem is
the fact it's true. Is
I also
in a way.
don't, but I don't think that like complaining about it is like either very helpful or a good use of anyone's time.
No, but it's easy and appealing, and it
makes them feel better.
It makes them feel. And I'm not trying to sort of
illustrate
judge
what gets my back up about it is that what it illustrates is that a lack of thought. Because it's,
but they're not thinking. They're just sitting on Instagram scrolling through. They're not like.
That's what I find annoying.
They're not
it's just like,
sitting on a podcast giving their
Think
opinions.
about it. I don't think about things on a podcast. I'm just saying shit that comes out of my mouth.
But I think the point. The point I'm really making is that we're not going to prevent people from saying it. You have to just it's how you react to it. So if you see it and you go, that's really annoying. It's like that XKCD cartoon of somebody is wrong on the internet. Yeah. It's like, why are you up at 4 o'clock in the morning? Somebody's wrong on the internet. You need to correct them.
Good luck with
but
that.
It's it's the sort of if you engage with it and you respond, it's easy to say. I get annoyed by things as well, but the problem really isn't them being wrong. The problem is us reacting to it in a way that we find more irritating than it needs to be. And then that's when it then gets very toxic, when you see people, when you see people who made a video and suddenly they get 50 people all coming on and slagging them off, that's really...
Doesn't help.
That's bad. Have you had that experience? I was going to
being
ask.
slagged off?
Yeah, have you had that kind of, I made a video and it got a real kind of angry response?
Yeah, I made a video about this and it's got like loads of negative responses.
Has it?
I'm not joking. It's actually the most negative response of any video that I've made in recent times. It was a very recent video about...
Your one about MIDI controllers?
Involved this.
So what was their response?
They were just like, costs too much. And
this one does?
Yeah, they're like, it's too expensive.
Well, just don't
and
buy
you're
them.
a dumbass and this is a dumb idea and like, you're dumb for making this and this is dumb.
Well, just buy the Korg one then.
No, but you can't...
There's a big plastic Korg one that costs like 25 quid.
Oh, I know, but I'm annoyed that you've made it like... Are you saying that I can't buy the Korg one? You've presented it with this.
No, you should buy the Korg one. Definitely.
Basically, I made a video about this and I used it illustratively because this is tiny and I just had it on my desk and I was like, oh, this is a good way of just demoing it. There's no ancillary stuff with it. It's just really simple.
You should spend loads of money on a MIDI controller rather than
I think what got people's back up was that I engaged a slightly clickbaity methodology to my titles and thumbnails.
Did you have a picture of you going, I can't believe it?
Pretty much. No,
Okay.
it didn't.
What was your clickbait thumbnail then?
The thumbnail was just this on my table with my hand pointing at it.
Yeah.
And it said, the cheap modular.
Okay, that wasn't a good plan.
Why?
Because it's not cheap. It's really expensive. You have to make it by hand. Do you know how much these faders cost?
Modular costs?
These faders cost a lot.
Give me your QMMG then. I'll swap you it for that. The point is, it is cheap. Even £100 for this thing is cheap.
And you have to make it yourself.
And you have to build it.
The Korg one you don't have to make yourself.
So I understand. And then also the title is kind of incendiary as well.
Okay, so what you're saying is...
The title was, don't buy a modular, buy a MIDI controller.
Okay, so what it is you're trying to get clickbait, and by doing that you're damaging my brand.
Yes.
Okay. Well, good. I wasn't aware of that.
Well, you shouldn't have sent me one of these things.
I shouldn't have shared it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. But the point is, like, by using a slightly clickbaity title, which, and let me be clear here.
Has it been watched a lot?
Yes. I had like 40,000 views in like 4 or 5 days, which is quite a lot.
Find out if anyone's buying them.
Apparently people are buying them because there are comments still going, I bought one.
Yeah, brilliant. Good.
But the point, people get their back up because of clickbait, but...
You get people's backs up in the different money.
I got someone's back up by successfully executing a use of clickbait, and which I might add, the video isn't a bait and switch. The video does not say, don't buy a modular, buy a MIDI controller with a picture of this going, it's the cheap modular. And the video goes on to say, you can get grids in Ableton Live. You can map all the controls of grids to this thing and all the controls of the Ableton Live selector kit. So you can just sit with this thing and just create endless beats.
That's the reason I made
exactly.
it.
You can scrunch the thing and do that. And you can have a very nice physical experience with a MIDI controller, which, when you close your eyes, is the similar sort of thing that you would be doing with a modular synth, which would cost you 15 grand.
And modular synth, you can't move like this either.
Correct, you can't accelerate.
Have you seen Finley's video of this?
No.
So Finley Shakespeare did an absolutely... He's got a red one. He did exactly... So he did this thing where I think it's... I have to remember how I think he's shaking it, and it's like strumming a guitar.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And then he's using these to change the chords, and then one of them is feedback, and it's amazing.
Yeah, that's good.
So cool.
That is good.
When somebody does something like that, it was just...
Yeah, you're like, that's why I
put in the accelerometer, because I'm not sure I'm going to use accelerometer much, but I bet people are going to use it.
Strain relief or something, but... Anyway, my point is that people get annoyed with you for all sorts of things, but in that instance, I'm afraid the reality is as well, like to my detractors, I don't know if you've tried to make a YouTube video ever, but if you don't play the game of it, clickbait in some way, shape or form, you won't get watched because you are competing with videos that are just like, I dropped a ball from 10,000 feet and this happened.
Do you not know about my history of YouTube videos?
No.
So in 2006, it must have been. I think YouTube started in 2005.
Yes.
So 2006, 7 maybe. I made a video as Music Thing when I was doing the Music Thing blog with the title "Where Daft Punk Got Their Samples From."
Oh yeah.
And it's got the first frame is like an I Love New York sign saying I love Daft Punk, but, and then it just goes through
all
the really famous samples on Discovery. That's got 4 million views.
Yeah.
And it had 4 million, basically all through that period.
Is that paid for your sabbatical?
And when they're on no, I never got a single penny from it.
What?
Because for a start, I did it before they even had I did it before they even had monetization. The monetization didn't exist when I did it.
Okay.
And then I think they probably introduced it after it had like 3.5 million views. I couldn't be asked fiddling with that. And it's full of samples anyway, I have no idea. But literally it was all through... They were on tour in America, I think, at the time. And it was like a year or so, it was getting, just constant. And what's funny now is there's hundreds of thousands of comments, certainly tens of thousands of comments, all of them going, yeah, don't you know, they're DJs. It's a DJ. That's what sampling is. Why are you saying sampling's bad? And then other people going, oh, wow, this is really shocking.
Yeah,
and literally
I thought they wrote
hundreds of thousands of just looping comments with exactly the same comments on them, one after the other. And then there's now loads and loads of copies of it.
Yeah, there are.
Loads and loads of clone
really
ones.
good. The ones, the best ones, are the ones where
they really dig into it.
They take face to face, and then they disassemble all the slices and little.
Now this is just like the Edwin Bird song and stuff like that, but it was
the wholesale
ends with the Robot Rock.
Yeah,
which is an amazing.
I forgot. I don't know what the tune. My brother would know what tune that's.
It's but you'd know it. I mean, it is just, literally.
It's just that.
Literally that.
It's
nothing.
just that.
No drum machine or anything. Just that.
I forget why I was annoyed at people on the internet, except to say that. I think. Well, okay. So
it was cost. Well, we always end up talking about price.
We talked about price, and what. It gets my back up because people are not thinking about it. They just go, there's just no critical thought. And my problem is that I've seen it from both sides, and I've worked in distribution and in sales, and I've met the people who do as I met you and lots of other makers. And so I understand to a degree, I talked to Daniel from IntelliGel, and he explained a very recent podcast. He was like the Cascadia, which a lot of people have it's expensive, but it's he made 500. He made 500 of them, and he had to buy parts 2 years before it came out to just secure.
That's exactly how you do it.
He said it had to be 2 to 3 times. It costs, the end price is 2 to 3 times what the cost price.
And it's you also get the weird thing where the thing. Like that, the AMU is really, really low margins. Steve, I don't think particularly wants to sell more of them because it costs
even for
a lot to make. Yeah, it costs loads to make.
Why?
Because
these sliders or the
it's ludicrous things you see. So here's the sliders. On the back, there are these soldered on washers there, like nuts that you screw into. The way we have done it, and it may well be that you could spend longer and optimize it more. Those cost like 60p each.
What?
The little soldered things.
A washer?
In China, in the fact, it's not a washer. It's like a lump of.
Like a standoff.
I will unscrew it. It's a standoff. I'm sure.
Standoff. 60p each.
Something like that. Yeah. And I mean, they're made by Worth Electronic, which is a proper company.
But it's just a little loop, a ring of metal.
Yeah. And I did spend. I'm getting better at that kind of stuff and the optimization, but I did spend. An amount of time going, there must be cheaper versions of
Yes.
this. I found a slightly cheaper version of it that was not actually the same height. So it makes the whole board slightly thicker. So that little ring of metal there.
Oh, that's got a
about
thread
that,
in the inside.
those buttons are about 40, 50p each.
Oh my God.
The
What?
and there's 6 of them.
Yeah.
So it has an accelerometer, which is there. That costs about like maybe £1 or something.
Yeah.
The main chip is one of the chips that was very strongly affected by the parts kind of crisis. So that's, I don't know what those cost now, but they'll cost something. And then it's got 3 circuit boards. And then these sliders are probably, £1.50, £2 each. So it's like, and we've looked at it and said, there definitely are ways that it could be cheaper, but they're not going to make it 50 quid.
Yeah.
And 50 quid's still expensive for a MIDI controller.
Yeah, it is when the Korg Nano controllers.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like
they'll probably have made like 40 or 50,000.
Exactly.
To start us.
And we've made less than 500 of these. I think we've probably made about 500 of them, but there's still a few in stock. But it's that kind of, also, just those screws
At the top and bottom.
There's a bunch of, it's quite funny when you did you make this one yourself, or did you finish one?
No, I got sent a complete one. However, the red one, I've got sent a red one to build.
Yeah. It's fine. It's just quite funny when you have to screw whatever it is, 16 screws in the front that kind of bolt the whole thing together, and then you put the back on. But yeah, so when we looked at it, you could say you could do a certain amount of optimization with how it's made and how you buy it. You could probably you'd say, okay, I'm going to have these standoffs so they're 3.5 millimeters or 3.7 millimeters rather than 3 millimeters, but 3 millimeters perfectly lines up with the bottom of the USB socket there, so it feels a lot nicer. You could strip off all the buttons, strip off the accelerometer. That would save you about maybe 5-6 quid on it or something. But then you've got 2 different versions. Yeah. So do you want to buy this? And I strongly suspect if I made a kind of 85 quid version that was quite cut down, people just thought, I'll just have the 100 quid version. You got 85 quid ones you don't want.
Pricing
but could you, I think to get it to sort of 50 quid, which would be a much better price, it would be great to sell it for that, you would have to do a lot.
People would still complain that it's more expensive than a Korg Nano.
And also you then have the actual profit that pays the staff at Thonk and pays a bit of me is then down the same amount. I mean, you could say, okay, we're going to cut the cost down by this much and keep our profit the same. Or, it's just, I don't know.
Well, you get rid of your profit and then Tom hasn't got the money to make anything else and goes back to normal work.
Let's go back to normal work, exactly.
Boring. So the other a topic that we love to talk about on this podcast is Uli Berenger. And there is something the elephant in the room that's what it's going. I've been thinking about that for a long time.
I can see you got that. Thanks. I'm glad you got that out. The elephant in the room. What is the elephant in the room?
You got cloned by fucking Uli fucking Berenger. That was
so funny.
Is what happened.
That was
You got cloned.
No, so the story of that was the original. I must have one somewhere here. In fact, I don't know where it is.
A planned chest of modules.
This ridiculous chest of dead modules.
I have one like that.
The original one was more primitive than this one. It's still recording.
It is as well. Good work.
So that was the original microphony. This is the...
Has it got Paris?
This is the Berlin Superbooth
Berlin
edition with German words on it and a map of Berlin there.
Eingang and Ausgang.
I was particularly pleased with that one.
It's nice.
And so it's not a great deal to that one, but that was the original one that the people did. This is the one that, in the plain version of it, that Roichi Sakamoto has it in his modular case, or did have.
Wow.
That was quite pleasing. Cool. So then, I think it's in the case somewhere, that did well and got sold, and people liked them. And people started using it for rings and like Carplus Strong, so they would... I remember seeing an amazing video with somebody with a pencil just tapping on the front to trigger off rings. Beautiful. Then Emily got in touch and said, can I do a version of this? I was like, obviously, yes, you can. So she designed ears, which my main input was saying, I'd really like it if at the bottom you put mutable music things on the bottom. And she said, sure, okay, we'll do that. It says on the bottom. And that had an envelope follower and a gate trigger and a just a much better circuit that doesn't clip as much, but it's not quite loud enough to my mind, but it was fine. And so she put that out. That was extremely successful. You see them everywhere. Have those ears ones. 4 HP, just like
it's
mine
great.
Was. Lovely.
It's a great module.
Then, obviously, Emily is kind of retired and is no longer making modules. Steve has kind of inherited a lot of her kit and stuff and said, do you have any objection to us doing a music thing version of ears? Because it's not really available. Like, obviously, so that is the music thing version of ears, which is exactly the same, but it's a little bit louder. Literally all there is. It's twice as loud as the...
it doesn't say mutable music things on it.
It doesn't say, no, because I didn't think she would want me to say mutable on it.
That's fair enough.
I was very pleased with the solder patch on the back there that you can't see. Very nice circles for soldering the thing onto the back.
Yeah, okay.
I like that. Anyway, as that was happening, as I was doing this, literally like a couple of weeks before it came out, developing it with Steve and prototyping and stuff, Behringer released, what's it called? Pulses? Radar, I think it's called.
Radar. I think
Radar.
I was going to Google it. But...
where it's got a kind of crazy like the black and green panel.
Yeah.
And instead of being 4 HP, it's 6 HP.
Yeah.
Because on the back of this, on the back of ears and on my version, you have these little pin headers, so you can change the response on the envelope follower and the gate and stuff. They were like, what we should do is pull that out and stick it on the front with some little switches. I think it's got like not a proper knob, but a little trimmer volume. And they charge like 100 quid or something for it. Mm-hmm. So it's more expensive, bigger, uglier, and I couldn't have been happier. Really. I was, proud, obviously, after all these years, to be cloned by Behringer,
Finally.
but not particularly worried about that as a commercial product.
So you're not worried that it will damage your sales?
I mean, I don't think we're going to sell Varsoms because I think pretty much everyone who's got modular has got ears.
It's a niche. It is a weird.
It's such a weird niche thing.
Weird
as well.
niche concept.
Yeah. That was very funny.
You were proud. You weren't annoyed or sort of like,
Not for that. No, there's all sorts of situations where I could be very annoyed or worried about it. But that was just.
It is a weird module.
I mean, I've been making fun of Behringer copying things for 20 something years now, I think, indeed. Pretty much. So that was absolutely
it's
fine.
just right from the original, April Fool's Behringer is making synths music thing.
Yeah, they're going to make a mini Moog and it's going to be 300 quid.
To Behringer has literally made a copy of one of my products.
Yeah. Well, really, it was one of Emily's products.
Yeah, I can't.
But yes.
But I credit you at least for the original idea. But I think it's bizarre.
It was. I mean, I suppose maybe it's just zero effort for them.
Have you bought one and seen whether they've gone the same? Did they re-engineer it or did they?
I certainly haven't. But I mean, there's the thing with this. I mean, I had to re-engineer this. I started with Emily's layout, and then I just wanted to move the LEDs around and stuff. So I reworked it a little bit. But I mean, there's not much to it either way.
Reworked her work.
I didn't like where she had the LEDs in a row there, and I couldn't work out which one meant which, so I put the LEDs on here. That's pretty much it.
My phone's died with the questions on it. Not that we're relying too much on them.
But yeah, that wasn't too much of a trauma. That
I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I don't know how everyone else would feel. Obviously, Lily Beringer has been cloning other things, and like the Make Noise Maths. I think the Make Noise Maths.
Do you remember there was that picture about 2 years ago of a Behringer designer with maths on his screen,
literally with maths open and like their version of maths, and was like, "Oh, this is coming."
I mean, it does show you the time frame. So it is whatever
it's quite a few years
they're doing now will be 2 years
out
along. Yeah. So if they could easily be doing a full range of music thing modules.
Yes, exactly.
Or whatever, whatever's hot now. They'll be doing their like rabbit elephant natural gate and that sort of thing, won't they?
I mean, I'm not sure if they would go so deep a cut as that, because I think it has to be on Thoman's site. But then was Ears sold as a full commercial thing? It was.
Yes, Ears was a standard. Like the first batch we sold through Thong. After that, it was just part of the normal lineup.
I have a feeling that it needs to be on Thoman's. Like, I have this weird suspicion that
that's when it hits the radar.
Yes, because Thoman have sales charts that they post for everything they sell.
I think they're just running down there.
Weirdly, you'll find that a lot of the Behringer things are now number one.
Yeah.
But the thing they're clones of were number one thing.
I mean, it's like Amazon, isn't it? It's like Amazon if you have a big hit on Amazon, then they just copy it and sell them. Or every other supermarket in the world.
Yeah, there's like
selling cornflakes in the supermarket, then they're going to say,
more flakes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, but the maths thing I think is just especially. All I will say is what I think is egregious is how it illustrates that maths. People are saying that maths is a copy. So why are you complaining about them copying?
But again, you're just talking about internet people.
I know. But
what I thought was, did you hear? I obviously very much enjoyed it. That James Blake podcast, where he was talking about his new album,
Tape Notes.
Tape Notes. Yeah. Yes, I very much enjoyed it because he talks about Turing machines a lot.
Yeah.
He's obviously talked about the Automatic Crime version, I reckon, but that's neither here nor there. But he was really interesting about maths as well. His view on maths was basically, once you understand maths, you understand modular.
Yeah.
Not in a kind of gatekeepery way, but just in a kind of, once you see all it is voltages going up and down, faster and slower. That's the whole thing. That's what an oscillator is. That's basically what a filter is. That's what everything else is. And I'd never heard it kind of explained quite like that from somebody completely musical and not technical at all. And I thought it was a really interesting take, that kind of once you get that, you aren't like, I'm patching together pieces of sound like plugins or something.
Yeah.
You're in modular world where you're right in the voltage. It's going to sound really pretentious, but there's something. I always think that notion of what is modular is very important, because it's when it's the difference between all my devices have a sound in and a sound out, and I just connect them together in a chain and they make their thing.
Yeah.
That's what affects
pedals.
boxes are, or pedals
the pedal mentality.
Exactly. Which I don't want to say mentality because that sounds very judgy, but it's a different way of thinking. Whereas the idea of so one of the things I've been doing a bit of in you read that David Tudor book where he does, which I always talk about every time, but he works at the most primitive level possible. So his device, he'd have a device like this big on a table with two sockets, and they often aren't even marked as in and out because you can use it both ways round. And in it will be a capacitor and a resistor and a knob. And that's it. And it's all passive, and you need to have lots of little amplifiers as well to kind of bring it back. But that idea from him, he can kind of patch together these feedback loops and he can kind of do anything. I think it's so kind of, there's obviously a spectrum. At one end you have, I suppose the Surge stuff is almost quite like that. But at the other end, it's the I'm going to buy some enormous digital device that's got loads of in and out. So
it's got in and out. It just gives you the polished result.
That notion of I can make this, but I need to patch it. And the way that then reduces your sort of gear acquisition, because you're like, well, I've already got it. I can make it.
That inevitably happens. If I'm there's some cool new thing, if I think about it hard enough, there's a way that I can use existing modules, which is not like that little professor in the MS-20 manual. That's that's it, voltage control. It's it's true. And I think, as with all stuff, getting into modular is, I see a lot, and it's something I always talk about. I was you see people who their first modulars are just a load of cool modules.
Yeah,
they haven't bought utilities or plumbing or.
But how would they know to as well? Exactly, it's a really hard thing to do.
Exactly, and that. But it's that exactly as you're saying. It's once you get into it, the option of patch programmability, being able to
how do I patch a kick drum? You're like, oh no, which module is good for a kick drum? It's like all modules are good for kick drums. There's no module that is not good for
your
kick
thing
drums.
That's broken that goes boom.
When you plug it in, that's a pretty good. It's not good for your speakers, but it will be fine.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah, I also love that he. There was a charting album that had a riff that was quite obviously an IntelliGel Metropolis.
Well, more importantly, the charting album had a riff that was a Turing machine.
Okay, yeah. Yes. Sorry.
And I think the I particularly liked was he made this and then he rang up Brian Eno to ask what to do with it. Not his Turing machine, but the thing he'd made. It was just a dream.
Nice to have Brian Eno on speed dial.
It was all good. I thought that was so wonderful.
You now need to make a module that's got a little screen that's like, what would Brian say?
You keep talking about. I could design the
ChatGPT little thing.
The Bleep Strategies one. Has somebody not done that?
So I've been thinking about doing a less oblique strategies, and just having pointed things. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Turn up the
reverb or turn down the reverb, or just more pointed things. I think.
So one of the things I've been doing with ChatGPT and time is lots of just. Because it's so good at writing code, I find it absolutely incredible writing code. If you know how to, basically, if you know how to run code on your Mac, if you know how to run Python or something, which is not an enormous leap, it's built into it and you can kind of do it. You know to save a file called .py and then go into that folder in terminal and say Python, whatever it is, .py, and it runs it. Once you know that, you can say to it, make me, and I'm sure it does in other languages as well, but I sort of know Python, so it does it in that. I found amazing the things you can get it to do for you. So a few days ago, I had this idea about, not a particularly novel idea, about a patch generator. I was like, imagine a module that's got 6 or 8 modules in it. They've all got inputs and outputs. It's got a mixer on the end. I don't want to just randomly make connections, but I want to suggest connections that are sound. So you can't patch, you can only patch into a module once it's connected to an output. There's no point in just connecting patches.
Things aren't connected.
Anyway, so I literally over breakfast made a note, this would be the kind of logic of it. Not much to it, the logic of it. And then I went to ChatGPT and I said, normally I'll do it really step by step. With this, it was not that complicated. I just wrote in this block of text saying, I want it to do this. I have a modular synth that has everything, has inputs and outputs. You'll have to give me some kind of file that I can complete that gives you the list of modules. So give me a sample of that so I can just type in what they are. And then you need to have some rules that are true. So this idea, I have this idea of an active module and not active module. It becomes active once something's patched from it into the mixer, and the mixer is always more active to start with because it's patched out to your speakers. Literally type this in. Go. Here's your file you need to put in the details of the modules. Here's the code. Works. And I was like, can you? And there was a couple of things that were just like literally me giving it feedback on it. I was like, something in the logic wasn't quite right. Like it seemed to be doing something. But what was then amazing was you start to look at these patches it produced. So I typed in like about 6 or 7 modules, and it did start producing patches. I was like, that would be interesting. That's quite weird. It did lots of just feedback, because obviously it's as interested in feedback as anything else. And it would be like, okay, patch the sine wave into the mixer, patch the filter into the mixer, then patch the output from the mixer back into the sine wave FM. And I was like, that would be great. But literally being able to go from there to there, that took 20 minutes, that entire coding process.
I mean,
and I now have that thing.
Remarkable.
And if I wanted, I could say, I'd now turn it into JavaScript and I'll just make it on a web page.
I was going to say, yeah.
Or if I wanted to do something a bit more sophisticated and typing in whatever, you could do that. The really funny one I did, I met a fantastic Portuguese modular guy whose name I will now massacre, called João Pimento Gomes, I think is his name. Met him from Instagram. He was in London and was like, do you want to have lunch or something? So I said, great. He does this really interesting stuff with like installations. So he'll do installations in galleries where he basically has a self-playing patch, often fed into some like big vintage speakers or something, and you'll go into the gallery and that's what he does. And he was talking about like, how do I preserve the output of this in a kind of artistic way? And he was like, I should maybe I'd just like record it on like 1/2-inch tape, really, so the artifact is this kind of, beautiful recording of it. I was like, no, you shouldn't do that. You should just print it out. I said, make a WAV file and then just print the numbers in a book. So you've got a physical book of the sample of the WAV. I was like, it'd be quite a big book, but then if you need to recover it, you just got to type the numbers in. It'd be fine. Obviously, I really like this idea. The next day, I was like, that'd be really interesting, wouldn't it? So I went to ChatGPT, and it was really like step by step by step. So I was like, okay, I've got a WAV file, and I got obviously the Amen break. It was like whatever, like 1.5 seconds mono 16-bit WAV file I did in Audacity. So I had my file. First of all, can you take this WAV and turn it into a CSV file or a text file of the numbers? Spits out a like 3-line Python program. Run it. Okay, now I've got a text file that's got the thing. I was like, no, I don't want to like design this in InDesign. And the text file is in the book. I want to make a PDF. Is there some kind of program I can use that can turn stuff into PDFs and make PDFs automatically? Yes, you can use this system or this system. I was like, let's use that system because it's Python and we're in Python. Okay, start by taking this file and run it down a column, and then next to the column, take the number and offset it left or right, so it's like a waveform. So you've got a dot. Makes it.
Does it?
And I like maybe 3 columns. And occasionally it'll get it wrong, or it will, you have to go back and go not like that or like this, or you get an error message and you paste the error message in. Then I was like, what I'd really like is chapters, because it's a book. So I went through the file and I was like, okay, there's a snare hit at like sample 23,000 and there's another kick drum at like 64,000. Made a little JSON file that just says 64,000. The kick drum arrives, and it was like a headline and then an intro, like a little intro. So it says, okay, now when you get to sample whatever in the file, just go to a new page and then make a little header with like a thing on it. And it did it. It was extraordinary. And so the next day, I think it was the evening after I'd had lunch with this guy, I was able to send him a 330-page PDF of the Amen break in chapters it could do with some typographic improvement, but it was an amazing thing. So if you're listening to this and you own a boutique arts publisher, I would love to work with you to make that a real publication.
Proof positive that Tom's sabbatical is just leading to complete thing.
We can sell it in the Cafe Otto gift shop.
Yeah. Wow.
But that
should laminate every page.
It's just amazing that ability to now write code in that way that is so beyond what we had a year ago.
It is amazing. It's like, the fact is that it's basically what all of Siri was supposed to be.
Yes.
Siri's crap. It's
totally.
Much like I said to you on WhatsApp. It was like Siri is a DOS prompt.
Yeah,
it's a DOS prompt, a bad DOS prompt at that.
Yeah.
And like DOS prompts, it never understands your formatting. You're like, is it CD backspace or is it CD space?
And it doesn't know anything.
But then, of course, there's this whole issue of it stealing people's information.
Yeah.
But it can make music, and it can provoke ideas, and it can just make our lives easier. I got interviewed the other day by a guy doing his master's thesis, and we talked for 2 and a bit hours. And I use Squadcast to do my remote podcast.
Yeah.
And Squadcast got bought by Descript. And Descript's like this sort of AI-powered transcription service. And you can just drag your WAV file into Descript, and it goes, how many speakers are there?
Yeah.
2. This is Alex. This is the other person. And then you hit go. And in 5 minutes, it has a good transcription. Not a perfect one, but a pretty good one with our names next to everything we said. So it alternates, it's broken up. And
do you think we should, another book for the Cafe Otto gift shop, should we make the Why We Bleep Tom and Alex book?
Yes,
but you can transcribe the whole.
Instead of it being the transcription, it should be a transcription of the WAV file of the whole conversation.
It could include that as an appendix, and it could be this thick.
I
mean, you could self-publish it. If you look up there, you see that blue book with Cementimental on the side.
Cementimental, yes.
Yeah, just grab that book. So this is a print-on-demand book by this fantastic kind of noise artist in London.
Those pages are
and
funny colours.
It's a noise graphic novel.
Yeah, okay.
I love it.
I mean, I can hear sounds as I...
You can hear. I almost think
pages.
I think of these as like graphic scores. You look at this and let's play that.
Yeah.
When we form our band, we can do that one.
I mean, yeah.
And then maybe that could be for the second album. It's a bit more intense that way.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
I mean, obviously, or you could work out what's the story behind each one. I just think it's such an amazing thing. And this is like print on demand. So he I guess, just created the file.
What's this?
And then I don't know what that is. But you then send it off, and I think they just cost like 15 quid or something. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah, the whole thing of the assistant, not the dictator, not my manager, not my boss, my assistant that will do that and just make life easier for you.
Well, I always think about it in terms of
things real.
The comparison with Google. So I started working in journalism pretty much at the time that Google was becoming mass. Before Google, say I wanted to find out anything as a journalist, I had to know the right person to ring up, have their phone number, or go to the library to find something out, to put it in an article. Then Google came along and you didn't have to do that. You just Googled it.
Look it up.
And that fundamental shit completely changes the job of being a journalist. Like I worked on work experience when I was at journalism school, where we would go to the Sunday Times, and I remember once my job was to ring up and try and talk to bishops. Can't remember what the story was. It's like 2 or 3 of us. We all turned up on must have been probably like a Thursday. Went and sat in the Sunday Times offices and got a list of bishops, and we had to ring them up and ask them about some great bishop scandal that was going on at the time. What do you think? And most of them were like, no, I don't want to talk to you. But then eventually got a bunch of quotes, and then they get a story on Sunday saying, bishops say whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not how you do it now, I don't think.
Now you just chat GPT. What would a bishop say?
What would a bishop say? They just make it up.
Ah.
But yeah, that as a tool, as a helper,
It's insane.
incredible. Yeah,
It's actually like it is the sort of the outsourced brain, but genuinely useful. Like, give me some answers, like, or organise some information for me.
it's that ambition thing, though, like I was talking about earlier. It's you could do this, you could work at this level, because that's the level you're working at, and that's what you can do. But now, because you have this ability, you can work at a higher level. You have to work at a higher level, because otherwise you're just, you have to be able to generate a printed book of a WAV file within a matter of hours. Otherwise, how are you going to be able to live? Otherwise, Uli's going to do it for you.
It's just when the AI prompt is coming up with the creative projects themselves, not just the results, but just like, what are its ideas of what it thinks art is? I mean,
see, I don't see much risk of that at the moment.
Well,
it's been very interesting with
it's no different to a Turing machine. It still requires a human to sort of decide whether to have it around them or not.
Yeah.
To put it on a shelf or to put it in the bin.
I mean, it's really interesting what's happened with the visual ones. So, like, when DALL-E first came out, I thought it was absolutely incredible because it could do any style and it could do photorealistic things.
Yeah.
So you could say, generate a picture of three grumpy-looking English women, and you were like, I know her.
Yeah.
I don't know,
It's like really realistic.
It's weird that she's got 7 fingers, but I do know her. And then I would say, like, make me a Walter Sickert painting of a woman playing a modular synth, and it did that, and it looked like a Walter Sickert painting. DALL-E 3, which is out now, has had all of that taken out of it because of copyright. It won't generate anything photorealistic.
Oh.
Everything in it looks like weirdly airbrushed, if it's even trying to do a photograph. Its default position is like, fancy internet forum illustration. So it absolutely won't do anything. It won't do anything in a style of any artist who died less than 100 years ago. So if you say Walter Sickert, I think it just says no, or it ignores it and does like a generic style. It won't do a Picasso, it won't do anything like that. And it won't do, and its photographs just look like weird and airbrushed. And it has this weird, like, humans are all like incredibly skinny and like elongated kind of model creatures now. And it's like and I'm sure it's because they've said much too much of a risk. We've got to take out anything copyright, anything remotely, and anything that looks like a photograph, because we get in trouble if it generates photographs.
Well, this is that thing you were saying to me before we started talking for this podcast of, like, you're supposed to dictate the limits to people, but sometimes people just want to, like, flex and do all kinds of shit. You don't know what people are going to come up with.
That's very true.
But that is a shame.
Well, also it's
I think they're amazing, those tools.
It's DALL-E, which is OpenAI, which has got hundreds of billions of pounds, well, tens of billions of pounds of investment from Microsoft. They can't take any risk. I think people like Midjourney and the other ones, where their entire business is to try and make shiny
fast break
pictures, they're not doing it. But it was extraordinary, and I think you also see that I can imagine at the moment ChatGPT is in a kind of perfect world where it's read all of GitHub, it's read all of Stack Overflow. It really doesn't know how to program. If you started saying you're not allowed those,
you break it.
Then you break it. And at the moment, it is absolutely extraordinary the way
I've been listening to Jaron Lanier doing talks, and one of the things he's like is the solution to this is attribution.
And payment.
And like, he has this sort of, I can't remember like the exact details of his kind of micropayments thing, but yeah, like but fundamentally you at least attribute, so that in the research result, in the result, it goes, here are the sources, here's how I arrived at this, so that you have
then have to pay them, because that's how copyright works.
Yeah.
Because the New York Times are suing OpenAI because they just got it to generate large chunks of the New York Times. with the right prompt, it produced, and they're like, "This is
the only way you can do this is it's read the New York Times."
Well, literally, it's the same text. I mean,
Right.
it's like it's not even different text. I mean, it shouldn't do it, but that's what it did.
Yeah, that's weird. It shouldn't do it.
But yeah, that sense that it might be that it's not going to be a straight line. It gets better and better. I think it's so remarkable with ChatGPT, with DALL-E, that it's kind of been lobotomized and it's gone away, and it's now something that is probably much more useful if you're like a business and you want to make some clip art.
The fact of the matter is that, like, you know, I think the genie is out of the bottle now, so it's not. There'll just be other ones that will go.
There will, but it's not straight. You know, it's not going to carry on this trajectory to suddenly become better and better.
It's
and
going to
better.
zigzag.
It's going to go up and down. There'll be troughs of despair. There'll be like, you know,
Like you
all that
developing
stuff.
modules.
Yeah.
Did you buy any gear? No, you made gear and you've got rid of things. You've
Since
got
last
rid of your
time,
DX7.
I swapped the DX7 for a Prophet 6.
Happy with that?
Yes, it's amazing. It's very good to have a proper, like, somebody who really wants to make a good synthesizer that works perfectly and is
Who's the person who doesn't want?
well. Don Buckler. Don Buckler was looking for something very different. Most of the things I buy are looking for something very different. Like, you know, they're esoteric or they're trying to be weird.
Well, you build things that only make sound when you move or don't move.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's been really.
Well, most things only make sound when you move or don't move.
Yeah,
To be fair.
but so I've liked it. I would probably, if somebody wants to buy a Prophet 6, they should probably get in touch because I'm probably ready to move on from it. But it's
For what?
It's beautiful.
For the headspace to not.
I don't know. It's fine. I'm not sure what I would get next. Then I bought an M8,
Oh yeah.
which I really liked. No, it's a beautiful thing.
Have you made any music with it?
No,
No.
I haven't made any music with anything.
Not even with like getting ChatGPT to like produce.
No, I wasn't.
Could you just make some music for me,
I
please?
wasn't that interested. I mean, I should. I'm now so kind of, at the moment. I'm so deep in kind of designing this thing that I'm designing, and it's so kind of, you know, there's a particularly joyful point which I'm in at the moment that when it is completely all encompassing. So you're thinking about, like I said, you're talking about, is this the right diode? And you're thinking about what does the front panel look like, and you're thinking about how do I explain this to people, and how will people come to it, and how will I develop it over time, and all that stuff at once. At the moment, it's just this kind of blast of all of those things happening.
That sounds quite delightful.
It's brilliant. I mean, that's what I love. That's what's really exciting, and it is quite. I had a really interesting moment. It was only a few weeks ago, where I was thinking about what I was doing, and realised that it's probably quite like writing a book. And it's the writing a book is the sort of thing people do on a sabbatical. They will take off a year, and they will produce a book, and then they will go to a publisher, and the book will come out. And sometimes the book will be an enormous success, and it will change the rest of their career. Sometimes the book kind of flops and is not a thing, but it's a thing you do for that kind of period. And I realised that the thing I'm designing is much more like a book. Maybe the things I've designed in the past are more like articles or a magazine. And a magazine's nearly as much work as a book, but it's definitely compressed. But it's much more like that. And that, for me, was a really interesting kind of mental breakthrough. I mean, I could then see, okay, I've taken a bunch of time off work. I'm making a big thing. And that makes sense. That kind of is an understandable thing to do. I could kind of explain it to myself. And that was a really interesting breakthrough. And then I started thinking about, well, if the sort of bigger thing I'm making now is a book, and if a normal module is an article, what then is a fanzine? What are the other kind of editorial like objects you have? I thought that was kind of just an interesting way of thinking about the kind of activity. What's a thing that you can make in, you know, a busy weekend? What's a thing that you can make in a couple of weeks of evenings that you can then put out in the world? Because those things are kind of important and interesting, and people do good, fanzines and things like that, and blogs, I suppose, that sort of thing. What's the equivalent of a blog? I always loved the way non-linear circuits in Australia, not quite, but almost had a kind of, felt like had a publishing cycle. I think he would do a workshop every month or every so often, and he had to have a new module for each one.
Oh, I see.
I thought that was such a brilliant discipline, and it's meant he produces such crazy esoteric ideas. He's not like, this will be the big one. He's like, well, I need something for next month. What's it going to be? There's this paper I read 15 years ago, and I reckon I could make that work with some op-amps.
So basically what you're saying is you need a deadline.
That's the other truth of it, yeah. You really need a deadline.
That's the I've tried a number of techniques. That's the problem that I have, like not having deadlines, doing my own personal projects and stuff that I'm doing. It's a problem. Like, I don't have a manager, but we've agreed that's probably a good thing. Although I did recently try the Cal Newport's time block planner thing, which is where you like organise every hour of the day, and there is a system for dealing with the fact that days change. And
because there's a manager, like for me, having Steve at Thonk is a really powerful, important thing, in that it's more like, it's kind of like an editor, in that I have somebody to go to and say, what do you think?
What do you think?
I have somebody who's really good on kind of, we will often just exchange emails where I'll be like, I'm thinking about doing like this. What do you reckon? And then sometimes he's really excited and somebody's like,
don't do that.
It's like, but somebody said they really like this. He's like, let's just keep it simple. Or he'll be like, that's great, but we don't have to do that now. That can be later. And that is incredibly important for me. And if you've got nobody like that for you,
I don't.
It would be worth thinking about. I wonder if it's thinking
ChatGPT to do it.
No, but thinking about, is there a way you can identify that kind of role for you, whether it's for your clients, whether it's like a mentor or whatever it is. That would be, because it's a really, I would feel very lost, I think, without that.
A manager. Is it? Or is it an editor?
I don't think Steve's particularly convinced by it. I think it was his metaphor originally, but the idea of Thonk as a record label for hardware, which I don't think is really terribly true, but I think for me and him, that's what it's like. It's like he's the label boss. He's not really the manager, but it's just having somebody who has a little bit of a stake and cares enough to want to reply, but is just able to just literally bounce an idea. I mean, it's bouncing ideas, the basic thing. It's the kind
I do have, we have a signal chat with myself and a number of other YouTubers.
Yeah.
And that is kind of like our water cooler.
Yes, and I'm sure that's useful.
Like a bunch of other people who do the same thing, who don't have bosses per se, and just make the same kind of things. And it's an opportunity to vent and to also just be like, what should I do? In this situation, or I'm struggling. I just think I'm struggling with.
Is that where you all come together to decide what's good and what's bad?
Yeah, exactly.
What's too expensive, what's not
cabal,
expensive.
Yeah, we're all paid to obviously say what's good.
You sit at your teenage engineering tables when you're.
If I'm paid this much, it's good. But if not, it's bad.
Yes.
That's how it works.
Has anyone been evicted for bad YouTubing?
Oh yeah. That's.
You can't talk about them. They've been erased.
What was I going to say? Oh no, it's gone. Basically, well, it's a support network, and it's also. It's a rant network. That's the fact of the matter. But it's also, it's like, actually, that was it. What I was going to say was, I had an incident because I'd been doing a video about the torso sequencer, the torso T1. And I had a very interesting, very difficult, but it is, I'm taking it as a kind of learning opportunity in my frustrations, which is that I found it really hard to learn that device.
Yeah.
And because when someone buys a KO2, they can make an Instagram post and say, I love it. But they don't understand everything that it does.
No.
And those people can also make a YouTube video where they just make a cool beat.
Yeah.
And they're only using 10% of the device. And they're not explaining any of it to the user. Whereas, unfortunately, for Muggins here, if I'm going to make a video about the KO2, I actually have to learn how the fucking thing works. And it's problematic because some of the learning styles vary and
interface and technologies, but the styles are the some things you just won't get on with.
Exactly. Well, may not be for me. Ironically, though, the Torso T1 has many things. It is a brilliant device. It's brilliant, and it is really successful as a design, I think. It's also quite easy to use. It has a number of very obtuse aspects to it, and those are the ones that have stymied me through the naming of it, but also, ironically, because of the manual. Yeah. It has a manual that is designed by this guy who is writing amazing manuals. They're really, really deep, and I feel bad bringing it up in this context. I don't want to denigrate. This person will see this, but I mean truly that they are good manuals but there's a simple fact, which is that the manual for the Torso T1 is, guess how many pages?
700.
That's a really good guess. You are off, but you are in the sort of end of things. It's 230 pages long. And it's a device with 80. It's just a little long slab with 18 knobs and 16 buttons.
To our earlier conversation.
Which one? Oh, what the? Well, but the fact, that manual, it goes into the extreme depth, yeah. and it explains the very notion of sequencers, and it starts, I think, without assumed knowledge. But what I found incredibly difficult about it was that, because it's 230 pages, aspects of this knob and this knob are separated by 40 pages.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm finding really complex.
It's so difficult with these. I mean, as I said, with that, I just found the complexity of it. I suppose the other thing is you do just have to spend time learning it.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's hard.
And some of these things are really hard.
Yeah. Some reason.
And some that was why that's really the manual for that.
Yeah, yeah.
And if there's something that's not in there, then you probably shouldn't have to do it. Really, I mean, it's kind of it's not, and it's interesting when you're labeling the fronts of devices as well. I always think if you can get away with not labeling something, then that means it's like the main knob on a Turing doesn't have a label. What's it going to say?
Does it?
Main knob? I don't even know what it's called. You could say lock. I think some people who've done aftermarket panels will say lock, but I never even refer to it as
one way, lock another way.
I always just call it a main knob. I should probably call it lock.
Why didn't you label it?
Because it doesn't have a name.
Because you don't need to.
And what would you say? As soon as you watched a video, what else could it do?
It's the knob.
I mean, those don't have labels on them.
No, but that's because they could
say 1, 2, 3, 4.
No.
I mean, it could, but it doesn't.
But that wouldn't help. But with the Turing machine, it's not obvious unless you've been told or you've spent time and worked it out that it locks.
But if you haven't,
one bar one way and 2 bars.
But that notion of, I mean, there's a bit in the original video. Basically, if you haven't seen that bit in the video, what is the thing? I mean, there's a video where it's showing a randoms pattern, and then you hear a melody and you flip it and it locks. If you haven't seen that, you can't buy you wouldn't. What would it be for? There is no possible purpose to the device. It's like a steering wheel doesn't have a sign on it saying steering wheel.
That's very
what else would it be?
That's a good analogy.
And I was it's things like if you've got an oscillator. I mean, actually on a DPO, the oscillator says frequency on it. On control, I didn't put a little sign saying control knob.
Yeah, but that's because it does different things. Because these you could put 1 to 8, but actually it might be 9 to 16 if you're using.
Well, also you can flip it so it's the other way around.
That too. Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's just I think it's really interesting when you get that. It's also I think when you learn. There's a real question about when you learn a device, like on a radio music. Would anyone read the knobs, read the labeling after using it for like a minute?
I mean, there's a one button and there's one knob.
There's two knobs. There's a start and a station.
Yeah.
And you feel like when you've got the start, when you've understood the concept, it's like a radio doesn't have a knob set tuning on it normally,
doesn't it?
I bet the big knob doesn't.
I bet like Dieter Rams would have liked to remove it if he could.
I bet his doesn't.
However, I suppose my point is only that the problem is that when you design a device and you do put labels on it, it's and I think a lot of my confusion has come from labels. Well, the device itself has some similarities in what some of the knobs do.
Yeah.
On the face of it, they almost look like they do set the same thing, but they have different names, and they do indeed have different functions.
And
it's adding the names has always been the confusion, because.
And are all the knobs the same size and in a line?
Yes.
Because that's the other thing I think is when you're designing something where you don't have a hierarchy of controls.
Yes.
And where, like on a DPO, there's a lot of knobs, but there is a very clear hierarchy of what's being. Same on a Turing. There's a very clear hierarchy. You've also got the nice text. I'd use these rotary switches and everything if you could, but they're just quite expensive and big. But that's a really nice. Just to go to the end and go back to get to whatever.
You have to look.
You shouldn't have had to look. And I think when we're doing that it would be really interesting to try and understand how often people read the labels on the devices in a modular, particularly if they're actually playing something. So in some ways that then means the labels are actually marketing. They're so that when you look at it you can understand it and you're like, I like that. And that's why people get angry about like make noise stuff. They look at maths and go, I am angry about maths because I don't understand it. And actually, does maths have any labels on it?
Yeah, definitely does.
Mine doesn't.
What?
Mine's an old school one. I suppose rise and fall are kind of labels,
it does.
aren't they?
Yeah, rise and fall are in the lightning bolts.
They're going to
and then there's plus and minus near the attenuators. And then there's inputs indicated with arrows. And then there's EOR, sum, or EOC, linlog.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Take it all back. But this is not to. I feel bad singling out this device because
I don't think it's a very different type
all the manual.
Device.
It's like, but it's just what is illustrated is that we all have different like learning styles, and sometimes an overabundance of information can actually be counterproductive.
Is it like? Do you get on with electron stuff?
I got an Octatrack
feels like
recently.
Something that people either love and get into, and I've never really used.
I saw
them.
an absolutely sensational comment that someone said the manual for the Octatrack is a fantastic document once you understand how the Octatrack works.
I think that's really true of manuals, though, isn't it? Yeah.
Which makes also complete sense if it's more of a reference manual.
Yeah.
And that is the problem, is that your manual writing is very hard because you're space restricted, and also people have different knowledge levels. You just can't assume that they know what that is. What depth do you go into it? Historically, some like synth manuals are great and some are terrible. I don't know. I mean, I have many rants I could go on about.
I was trying to find my easel manual, which I've printed out somewhere, which is a beautiful manual.
Is that the electroorganism thing?
Yeah.
The book, the Alan Strange one.
Yeah, well, I have the little manual version, not the Alan Strange wrote
programming the electroorganism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, programming and meta-programming.
And meta-programming,
which again refers back to something we were talking about earlier, was the meta-programming. That's normalization, is the meta-programming.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that is the cards, but yeah.
I just love the picture of the weasel. The weasel. Just literally, I will put that on a t-shirt and I will buy it all day long. Well,
should we look at our pictures?
Yes, we should.
Oh, yours is really good.
Thanks. I do draw.
Yeah, that's very good. Mine is a little bit more abstract, but it does. I seem to have got the top of your head slightly wrong.
You actually wrote computer controlled as well. You had a good go at that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'll hold this up as
well.
That's
very good. Beautiful. I think that's.
This is all right, isn't it?
That's very good.
I also got.
And hang on, you got this mouth perfectly floating in the right spot without looking.
Yeah. It's because I have it's just...
See, I'm not sure what this bit was.
You've only got one ear, though.
You've got two eyes, but they don't really connect with your glasses much.
What's this? Oh, are these my glasses?
That's an ear, I think that's glasses.
Yeah, cool.
Good, I love it.
Well,
I'm going to keep those. I've thrown them.
Good, they're yours.
Yeah,
Here's to another year.
absolutely.
Happy building. Looking forward to your electro-organism.
Yes, it'll be good. I have a very clear deadline, which is that event.
Is that in May?
It's in April. So I need...
April, May follows, and Super Booth has
And then
May.
Super Booth, it will, all being well, it will be at Super Booth.
Oh, well, that's very exciting.
But I mean, obviously we need to work out whether we will have...
Stock.
We won't have, like, hundreds of stock. I don't think
you need hundreds of stock. You just need a fairly final version, which you'll have had to have made.
We would definitely... Well, I mean, I would say definitely there's always possible horrors that can happen, but I think... we should have something to show that. Well, yeah, I don't. It's really a decision for Steve to say.
Yeah.
Does he want to show? Here's a thing we're making that is going to come in the next few months, or would he rather say? I always remember one Super Booth when I showed 5 things, and some of them took like 2 or 3 years to come out, and one of them's never come out.
Which was that?
That was the guitar pickup in a panel.
Why not?
I think that actually, I'm pretty sure I've seen.
Time has come.
I'm pretty sure I've seen kits of them at Thonk.
What?
I just think it never got released. We could never find the right pickup.
Oh, but the kits were made.
I think so. I'm pretty sure I've seen a folder saying electrophony on it, or a little bag. So if you want a slightly elderly and not tremendously useful device, get in touch with Steve.
You just described most of music technology.
You can probably pick up a Move as well while you're at it.
A what?
The Move one that's going to...
I do want that.
You should get one.
Is that actually... Can you buy that?
Yeah, they did like 100 of them.
I kind of do want that.
I've got one here. There it is. It's actually really fun. It's got the PIR sensor in the front, and then it's got that's a relay, so it clicks furiously. Yeah. And then
that's what it clicks.
This inverts it. So if you do it on move, it passes a signal when you're moving. There, it passes a signal when you stop. And then flip, I think, reverses it, because you can also feed it back, so it makes an oscillator.
Oh,
because if you patch that into that, it clicks and then it clicks back and clicks and clicks back. What I really like is using it for panning. So you put a clock into it, and then you just patch it left and right. You get the hardest possible kind of clicky left-right panning. That's quite fun. And you can stand in front of it. But it's very clicky and pleasing. Also, if you leave it, if you have it in your modular, I think it's probably worth taking it out. It will obviously just click all the time because as you move, so you go, look, why is it doing that? And so you then end up, if you patch something into flip, it then stops.
It stops clicking.
It's a very pleasing thing.
Yes, sirree. Thank you, Tom, as ever. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and ideas with me. You have probably heard some of the clues, did you? The thing that Tom is developing. He was sowing them throughout, intentionally or not. So look for the music things coming soon. Tom has this residential that he is doing. I'm going to link it below and around. I think there are still places left at the time that this will go out. And of course, Tom is the person behind Music Thing. Music Thing make modules, and they make kits that you can get from Thonk. Maybe it's a New Year's resolution, but if you're on the fence, like, soldering really is easy. Like, you can teach yourself, watch some YouTube videos, you can learn how to do it. And like his mini drive thing is a very, very good first kit. It's mostly done for you, but it's just a few through-hole bits that you solder or solder to use the American term. So yeah, Tom's amazing, and I wish him well on his sabbatical. And I will be thinking about ChatGPT, I think. Holy crap. For example, after this conversation, I was like, oh, can I just make a web page where the words Mylar Melodies spin around in 3D text over a flashing background? And I was like, oh, can you just make me a web page that will do that? And in 10 seconds, it had spat out the code, and I pasted it into Chrome, and it did it. Yeah, another thing I saw some people doing apparently with ChatGPT is that, and I think you need the paid version, you can upload the manuals to products and ask ChatGPT questions about the product. And I think it can answer. I saw someone doing that. I tried to upload a PDF and it wouldn't let me, but I think if you pay for it, if you pay like the $20, then you can. It's kind of wild what is possible with that thing as a truly AI-powered assistant. And one of the other things that we were sort of hinting at was this Rabbit thing. I don't know if you've seen it, but Rabbit is like this startup company, and basically they have this teenage engineering designed little yellow pocket device, and you push a button and you talk to it, and it's what Siri should be. It literally, you can speak natural language to it, kind of articulate your thoughts as best you can, ask it to do things, and it can do things, perform actions which involve it actually using apps invisibly that you are logged into. It's all sort of slightly weird, but I feel like we're on the cusp of something. Like, we're on the cusp of AI-powered assistants being helpful for once. Unlike the ones in our phones. And I really don't understand why the Rabbit thing is not just why is that not just an app? Because I would love to have that in my phone where it could really do things. But I guess there's a permissions level thing that if it is interacting with apps, then obviously apps can't interact with other apps. Yeah, always interesting, Tom. And I hope you found it useful. I hope you've learned something. And I hope you will stick with us, for we have many more bleeps to come. In fact, I'm sitting on a little nest of bleeps, with more being recorded all the time, it seems. So if you'd like to support bleeps, here's the bit. It's patreon.com/Mylar Melodies. There are benefits. There's a Discord community. There is also this weird reading of Whistle and I'll Come to You that I did at Christmas. You can get on the Patreon and go and listen to that. It's like an hour of me reading you a ghost story. M.R. James is awesome. Love M.R. James. And I'll put links below to other things that Tom hinted at and signposted, so that if you want to dig through and seek a little inspo, if you have a little bit of time, please do. Please share this episode if you've enjoyed what you hear. Tell your friends, because that is free and incredibly valuable in order to help this thing grow. There is more to come. Thanks very much, friend. We'll see you next time.